Good
afternoon, everyone. I call this meeting to order. Welcome to the 123rd meeting of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Industry and Technology. Today's meeting is being held in a hybrid format in accordance with the standing orders. Before we begin, I would like to remind you that we have taken important preventative measures concerning acoustic incidents to prevent disruptive and potentially dangerous acoustic incidents that could cause injury. We would like to remind all participants to keep their earpieces away from all microphones at all time. As stated in the Speaker's communique to all MPs on Monday, April 29, the following measures have been taken to help prevent acoustic incidents. Namely, all earpieces have been replaced with a model that significantly reduces the likelihood of an acoustic incident. The new earpieces are black, whereas the old ones were gray. Please use only the approved black earpieces. By default, all unused earpieces at the start of a meeting will be disconnected. When your earpiece is not in use, please place it face down in the middle of the table sticker as indicated on the image here. Please refer to the table cards for the acoustic incident prevention guidelines. In addition, the room layout has also been adjusted to increase the distance between microphones and reduce the risk of feedback from an ambient earpiece. As you can see, these measures are in place so that we can carry out our activities without interruption and obviously to protect the health and safety of all participants, including interpreters. Thank you for your cooperation. Now, before I start, I'd just like to make a brief point. Colleagues, you've received two budget requests. One is for a study we're working on today. That is the LACIS technology study. And the other is for the general expenditure budget. There's one for ELYSIS today for $500, and the other one is for $2,500. Is there unanimous consent to adopt both of these budgets?
Consent for the two budgets that were sent to members. I see no objection, so I thank you for that. In accordance
with the motion adopted on March 18, 2024, the committee is undertaking its study of the development and deployment of the LACIS technology at Rio Tinto and Alcoa facilities. Today I would like to welcome the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, François-Philippe Champagne, as well as Simon Kennedy, a Deputy Minister, who is accompanying him today. As you know, the first hour will be on ELYSIS, and the second hour will be on budgets, on the estimates, rather. I would ask you, therefore, to keep as closely as possible to the agenda for today's meeting by concentrating on ELYSIS for the first hour. Without further ado, Mr. Minister, I give you the floor for your opening remarks. Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, it's a pleasure to be with you today. I'd like to thank you for inviting me to speak on two important subjects. The aluminum industry, obviously, which is the pride and joy of our people in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, even in Mauricie, in Quebec, and the rest of the country. And, of course, for talking additionally on the main estimates.
Here before this committee today to discuss, Mr. Chair, the main estimates for the fiscal year 24-25 and to answer any questions on Canada's aluminum industry and some key investments. I must say we have seen record investments in the aluminum industry in our country. So it's going to be good to talk with this committee and see what we can do more together. The request we put forward on the main estimate is for $11.5 billion, which includes funding for normal operations and also for program delivery for both the department and the portfolio agencies that we have. It also includes funding to continue the implementation of Budget 2023 measures, as well as spending reductions under the refocusing government spending initiatives that we have launched. Du secteur automobile à celui de la biofabrication.
From automotive to biomanufacturing, from AI to green and digital industries, we need to ensure that Canadian companies remain at the forefront.
Our government has introduced tax incentives to encourage the adoption of clean technologies across the country. And that's why we're making landmark investments in new industries like EV and battery manufacturing. And colleagues would have seen that Canada is winning big in the world. I think we're becoming the reference when it comes to EV vehicle, and that is really thanks to our workers, which are the best in the world. These investments are attracting attention from the major automakers and battery manufacturers around the world. In fact, Mr. Chair, you will have seen just last month, we welcome news that Honda Canada will be investing $15 billion to create our country's first comprehensive electric vehicle supply chain. I just want to say to the colleague, that is the largest investment by a company in Canada's history. It's the largest investment in Honda's history, and it's the largest investment in our auto industry since the creation of Canada. So that was big news for everyone. And these investments are a strong vote of confidence in Canada. It's a strong vote of confidence in our skilled workers. And it's also a strong vote of confidence in the ecosystems that we have been building and the competitive business environment that we have created in this country. Les entreprises canadiennes sont des leaders mondiaux dans des domaines comme le captage.
Canadian companies are world leaders in fields such as carbon capture. My colleagues are well aware of this, as well as hydrogen fuel cell technology.
Adoption of made in Canada clean tech solutions for the net zero economy. On the digital front, we are working to connect all Canadians, regardless of where they live, with high-speed access at affordable prices. We are also trying to balance digital innovation with trust and privacy through our digital charter. En effet, notre charte digitale, qui est devant justement le comité.
Our digital charter, which is currently being studied by the committee, will further protect Canadians' privacy, as well as define new ways of overseeing the development and use of new technologies such as artificial intelligence. On the topic of AI, Chair, our Pan-Canadian Artificial Intelligence Strategy is helping Canada's best and brightest to reach new heights, attracting top talent and helping train our young researchers. For committee members alone, the Pan-Canadian Artificial Intelligence Strategy was the first of its kind in the world. I can tell you that colleagues around the world are applauding Canada's initiative and leadership in this field.
Colleagues, we have seen that we have recently announced an historic investment of $2.4 billion in artificial intelligence to keep our leading position. This is in what we call computing capacity, to make sure that we have the best talent. We need to give them the tools to continue to have that leadership position. This support is earmarked to build and provide access to computing capabilities for Canada's world-leading AI researchers, startups, and scale-ups we have. It will also, among other measures, help small and medium-sized businesses adopt AI solutions and support workers in dealing with this very new technology. Maintenant, chers collègues, permettez-moi de passer à un autre sujet très important.
Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to move on to another very important subject, of which I'm very proud, the Canadian aluminum industry. It's world-renowned, as everyone knows. I'm originally from Shawinigan, and the first aluminum plant in North America was here, and it's been here for a century. Most of my uncles worked at the Alcan aluminum plant. It's an industry I'm particularly familiar with. We are the world's fourth largest producer of aluminum and have been a strategic supplier to North America's industrial base for well over a century. As my colleagues in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, among others, are well aware, the industry's contribution to our economy is considerable. We're talking here about $3.45 billion and over 30,000 jobs last year alone. Today, our operations in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean are the largest in the world, barring China. You know, it's Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean. We're trying to be inclusive here, as you can see.
To catch up and reduce their carbon footprint, carbon-free aluminum will become an increasingly essential commodity. C'est pourquoi il est important d'investir dans des technologies comme ELYSIS.
That's why it's so important to invest in technologies like ELYSIS, the committee's topic of discussion today. ELYSIS enables us to play a part in reducing our global emissions while preserving Canada's competitive edge. ELYSIS represents the aluminum industry's most significant innovation capacity in over a century. It's quite something to be able to achieve this here at home with our own engineers, talented people, and other workers. This greatest innovation in aluminum in 100 years is happening right here in Quebec, and that's something to be proud of. This new technology also presents a historic partnership between two of the world's largest aluminum producers, Rio Tinto and Alcoa. Canada is proud to be part of this great collaboration between both companies, and of course with the Quebec government. It's investments like these that will enable our country to lay a solid foundation toward net zero in the aluminum industry, which is being envied in the world. I can tell you that when I talk to the major automotive manufacturers, they all dream of being able to source their aluminum from Quebec.
Many are strategic trading partners. The question is no longer why Canada, but rather how and when they can invest in Canada. They realize that we have what very few countries have. I call them the 5 pillars. The first one is we have a very talented workers. I would say we have the best workers in the world, and people recognize that, and Canada is a big magnet for talent. The second thing is that we have strong and growing ecosystems in the automaking industry, in EV, in batteries, in aerospace and energy, and so on. We have been blessed by natural resources and resources that can build batteries, but also semiconductors. And I would say when I talk to the EM, it's all about proximity. Proximity to resources, market, and the assembly line. We have abundant renewable energy, Quebec in particular, which is about 99%, and generally in Canada about 80%. So if you want to decarbonize, Canada becomes the place of choice. And finally, thanks to our network of trade agreements, we now have access to 1.5 billion consumers around the world. Canada is the only G7 country which has a free trade agreement, all the other G7 nations. So I can tell you when you say that to investors, they understand that Canada is the place to be in the 21st century. So to sum it up, Mr. Chair, together we're building Canada's future, a future that's going to be green, a future that is digital, a future in which our industries transform and gear up for a future in which we can all take part and benefit from. I want to say thank you to your time. And again, Mr. Chair, if you allow me, I just want to take the opportunity to thank our Canadian workers. I know people always ask me, what do investors ask you first? The first thing is about talent, and everyone recognizes we have the best workers in the world. So with that, I'm happy to take questions. Merci, chers collègues.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Minister. To start things off, we'll give the floor over to Mr. Martel. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being with us here today. It's a pleasure for me. With the new schedule that we're seeing today, are you still comfortable and confident about the success of Ulysses?
Mr. Chair?
Oui, Monsieur Van Bijnen.
I'm sorry, but the translation is not coming through effectively. I don't know if anybody else is experiencing that.
It appears that it is fine here in the committee room. So are you sure, Mr. Van Bijnen, that your settings are correct, that you've selected English?
Yes.
Okay, well, let us know if it's still not working, and we'll try to make sure that IT reaches out to you to make sure that translation is working. But it appears, it appears to be working here. Ça fonctionne ici, Monsieur Perkins me confirme que ça fonctionne.
Mr. Perkins is confirming that it is working here.
I'm hearing your voices clearly, but I'm not hearing the translation voices clearly.
Someone from IT will reach out to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Monsieur Martel.
Président. Alors,
Monsieur Martel.
la question que j'ai à vous poser, c'est...
Thank you, Chair. The question I have for you, with the new Ulysses timetable we're seeing, are you still confident that Ulysses will succeed? That's because some people back home seem to doubt this. I'd say so, Mr. Martel. And you know we practically share the same region. My constituency goes as far as Lac Bouchette, and what gives me confidence is the workers. I've met them on several occasions. I've made 2 or 3 announcements there. You know, the talent that we have there here is unique in the world. So when you have 2 giants like Rio Tinto and Alcoa joining forces, when you have giants like Apple investing in Ulysses, when you have BMW wanting to source the aluminum that we make in Quebec, that gives me confidence. Obviously, when we have this new technology after 100 years, it's clear that there will be moving deadlines, but what really gives me confidence is our workers. I've met them, they have confidence, and if our workers have confidence, that gives me confidence. Minister, I'd like to know if Canada has any guarantees on return on investment. Is Canada a shareholder or a partner? In our case, for Ulysses, we have made various contributions. If you look at our investments, you'll find that they are around $80 million, and there's more good news to come. We can't do everything in a day, but there's more good news to come in the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean region. This good news will help us develop the technology further. We have a good partnership with the Quebec government. We're partners with Rio Tinto and Alcoa. Apple was also one of the first investors. So yes, we've made contributions. We don't have any equity. If you're asking me if we have equity, no, but we have contributed public funds to help advance this technology. Is the consortium accountable to the Government of Canada at every stage of the technology's development? Yes, well, even more than that, I meet with the CEO of Rio Tinto at least once or twice a year to discuss this. As you may know, in June 2023, we signed a strategic agreement that covers almost the next 10 years. So I'd say that there's a lot of transparency there. What gives me confidence for the people listening to us in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean is that the technology is out of the lab and is now into the field. As you know, because you're familiar to this, Mr. Martel, when we go from a prototype to an industrial or even a commercial process, obviously there are stages to follow. I look at when Apple decided to invest in the tech, and I was with a meeting with BMW on February 21, where all BMW plants in North America are now sourcing their aluminum from the Saguenay. There are major players in the industry, and if BMW and Apple have confidence, I have confidence in our workers that they'll succeed. As you've said, there are other investments coming in the next few weeks from the public sector. It's already been anticipated, yes, so it's coming. In your investments, does the government require that these funds be spent on local and Canadian resources? Yes, there's always a clause about maximizing local benefits. That goes without saying. When we spoke with the CEO of Rio Tinto, he told us that 50% of investments were in one sector, but everything that goes further, we always try to maximize our regional economic impact. And that's why when I go there on the ground, I always meet with the union to make sure that obviously the economic and social benefits for the region and as a whole are eventually there and eventually also for Quebec.
Agreements, there is accountability, so the company has to give us updates, but we also have regular meetings with Rio Tinto's people. You were with me recently. I always meet the head of the union, the local leaders. Mr. Beckrès is now the new CEO who's in charge of aluminum activities, and I met him. I am in talks with him, and I follow up. But I also know that after 100 years, the technology has to be adjusted. However, we do have accountability measures. You know that Rio Tinto is a huge player in Saguenay. I'd like to ask you, will you make sure that the first smelter is in Saguenay? Well, obviously the conversation is underway. There are two partners, Rio Tinto and Alcoa. What people are focused on is talent. The talent we have in aluminum, I used to say it was in Shawinigan, and now it's definitely focused in Saguenay, and I think that that's what will help us. However, Rio Tinto people are very much interested in the future, and they know that we have a lot of talent in Quebec, in Saguenay. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Martel.
Over to MP area, and I'll just take a moment to wish him a warm welcome on the committee. It's his first meeting officially as a member of INDU, so welcome MP area. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, thanks for coming. I would like to commend you on consolidating the different research and development programs we had and starting something like the Strategic Innovation Fund, which is doing quite well. 2015, when I got elected, I told the first innovation minister the name got changed from industry, not to use the word innovation in any sentence which does not have the word commercialization. So I want you to tell the committee whether the commercialization is a focus also when we give on more funds to IRAP, to SIF, and other R&D programs.
You, and if I may add my word to the chairman, your involvement in the committee is a great addition to this committee. This is one of the very serious committee of the House. You're quite right, and I think ELYSIS is a prime example of that. You know, we went from something in the labs to something that we're trying to commercialize. This is exactly what we need to do in all technology. I agree with you, you know, and I say, let me say also thank you to the officials I have, because I just want to acknowledge Deputy Kennedy, which is with me, which has been helping me at every step of the way. I think that the industrial policy of this country has taken a track that like we've never seen before. Sometimes I go back to what CDR wrote at this time in the building that I sit in. We really push the boundaries now of industrial policy to new high. And I would say, if I come back to your question and analysis, the fact that now Canada and Quebec, in fact, has the largest smelter in the world, if you exclude China. The last one was in Iceland about 10 years ago. That you have people like Apple imagine, that would invest. It's just a testament to what we have achieved as a nation.
Thank you, Minister. Thanks for the investment of $2.4 billion in the artificial intelligence, and especially the $200 million for industries in healthcare, agriculture, and manufacturing to adapt and use AI in their operations. So that's a good thing. Coming to this electrical vehicle industries, from mines to mobility, I know things are going quite well. The critical mineral industry, where the time taken to implement a mineral exploration project is very long. I'm glad to note that one project, one environmental impact assessment strategy is being taken. I also note that we have got a lot of battery plants coming up, a lot of electrical vehicle plants coming up, but people are not hearing much about the mineral processing aspect of it. As you know, that China is the leader. I think 70 to 90% of the critical mineral processing is happening in China. It is a tough business. Sometimes people think that it pollutes much more, but that is the critical part of the entire chain. Can you highlight what you're doing to make sure that in addition to mining critical minerals, in addition to having battery plants, in addition to having electrical vehicle industries, this particular key component in the chain of mineral processing, where are we at and what are the plans?
Well, that's a very good question. And Mr. Chair, if I may, that might be also a study for the committee at future times when you've passed C27, because that is a very interesting part. I'll give you an example. I was just in Washington recently and in Nebraska over the weekend. First, cobalt. Colleagues may know or not know, but I can tell you when I was in Washington, I said to my colleagues, do you know there's only one refinery of cobalt in all of North America? And everyone was pretty surprised by that. And I said, do you want me to tell you where it is? They said, well, I guess you're going to tell us even if we don't ask. I said, sure. It's in Cobalt, Ontario. And I said, do you know how long it took to permit? So they took about the good part of a decade. So I said to my American friends, well, you know, it's probably better if we work together to scale, because what we need now is speed and scale. Because if you want to have yours, it's going to take at least a decade. So cobalt is a good example. If I come back to the motion you had on Rio Tinto, you may have seen that now Canada is the largest producer of titanium in the world. We've displaced Russia, thanks to an investment by Rio Tinto, in fact, which invested close to $1 billion in Sorel, which is a small town in Quebec. Now, what you do with the titanium, imagine, now you can produce titanium powder. With titanium powder, you produce 3D printing of titanium parts, and with that, you can basically repair jets on aircraft carriers. So I'm just giving you an example of where we're making headways, but I would say we need to work together in this committee as a whole, because it's all about speed and scale, like you say, to make sure that we have resilient supply chain in North America.
Thanks for mentioning titanium. Obviously, in addition to the applications you mentioned, it's greatly used in the aerospace industry because of the lightweight and other properties titanium has. Is a very good addition to Canadian industrial landscape. On the aluminum and steel industry, always had a concern. But I have not gone in depth into this Rio Tinto investment. Hopefully, that's a very good news. My previous concern, several times I've spoken in the House of Commons, that being 100% foreign-owned companies in both aluminum and steel industries, steel sector, there was no capital addition. I know they have been modernizing. We have got green steel, we have got green aluminum, etc. But there has been no additional installed capacity during the last 20 years, but maybe now things are changing. And the steel and aluminum companies are not exporting beyond North American market. That's my concern. We have the talent, as you rightly highlighted. We have the natural resources, but we have to go out to the world market. Aluminum, if I'm not wrong, beyond North American market, maybe they export some small portion to Europe, but I don't think they're exporting anywhere in Indo-Pacific region. Same with the steel industry. Steel industry, if I can remember, the installed capacity is around 17.5 million tons for the last 20 years. There is no growth in the installed capacity. But is it, I always say that economic security is national security. Is the 100% foreign ownership of these two critical sectors, is it stalling our growth in the installed capacity?
But I would say the great thing, that the vision we asked was to be the green supplier of choice to the world when it comes to steel, aluminum, batteries, semiconductors, and beyond. I would say the fact that Rio Tinto has its largest install base, if I recall, I think it's Canada. I know they have a number of assets in Australia, but the fact that they have invested, and this is for more than a century. Like I said, I come from a riding which had the first plant in the world, I think, of aluminium. So, and it was there for a century. So clearly they're long-term investors, to say the least. And I would say to you that now ELYSIS is bringing us to the next century, I would say, because now what I hear from the original equipment manufacturer, the automakers, they want green aluminium. I will bet to you, and I hope it's going to be on the record, that people will move from electric car to green cars. And you don't need to take it from me, but take it from the CEO of Mercedes-Benz. So Mercedes-Benz has a vision that in 2035, if you buy one of their car, they will give you a certificate of zero carbon. So obviously what we're doing with Quebec and aluminium and what we're doing in Canada, we're putting ourselves ahead of the game, because if you want to be integrated in these long supply chain, you will have to have decarbonized. And thanks to the vision we had and the investments that we've been making with the company, now we're ahead of the game, a bit like we were on AI. So for me, this is us betting on the future, betting on our people, our capacity to innovate. And I can tell you, I've been on the site of in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean many times. Those are some of the best in the world. Generation of people have worked in aluminum, just like my uncles, which most of my family work at the plant at the time.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Minister. I'll give the floor to Mr. Simard now for 6 minutes. Thank you very much. Just a little update. There's a new technology there, so this is new in 100 years, but that's not quite true, because we had different cells that were created, and so there have been numerous innovations over the years in aluminum. But what's going to happen with ELYSIS is to reduce our carbon footprint in the aluminum sector. Now, I have to say, Mr. Minister, that where you are, it's a daily discussion, aluminum. I've had discussions with Minister Laforêt that was published in the media. We had a meeting recently with people from Rio Tinto and Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, and coming out of that meeting, I didn't think she was going to do it, but she said that she was going to make an announcement in April regarding ELYSIS. Our party was there, the Quebec government was there, and the federal government was the only party that wasn't there. So I have to ask you if you're prepared to make this investment. We know that ELYSIS will happen in Jonquière, in my riding. So are you going to make that announcement soon, and have you had discussions on the subject? Yes, and I'll invite you. But I can't publish all the good news in a single day, Mr. Simard. Clearly, we will visit your riding. My riding is almost right up to yours, and clearly we'll make that announcement. And we're working hand in hand with the Quebec government, with Madame Laforêt. And yes, this is good news. But this is a great innovation and great evolution. There have been other smaller ones, yes. But what I've heard from Rio Tinto and Alcoa is that this is the greatest in a century. So these people know what they're talking about into aluminum. Okay, let's accept that. But I just wanted, because I like things to be very clear and transparent, there will be participation announced by the federal government in the ELYSIS technology. Yes, we're going to do more. We're already there, as I said. In 2018, yes, I know there was the 60 million, but you've mentioned that several times. There will be further participation announced by the federal government in ELYSIS soon? Yes. Okay. I'm delighted. Thank you. Well, I'm happy to make you happy. Excellent. Well, I always wonder if the federal government is also studying the second and third levels of transformation, because, you know, at home we're making other things out of aluminum that are going to be used in the building of cell phone towers. And there's a problem with the aluminum that came from Malaysia. It makes it difficult to use it in that second and third levels of processing. So is that something you're studying? Well, you know, the issue we have with ELYSIS right now is the capacity. I had to say to the deputy minister that we have to stop selling. No, I'm talking about aluminum in general now, not just ELYSIS. So, yes, these pre-fired cells are working now, but it's become difficult to market in certain parts of Canada and Quebec. So is there a problem, do you think? Yes, well, I think that one thing we have to be delighted about in Quebec is the big work sites that we have launched in Norfolk since we started building hydroelectric dams. GM and Ford now that will result in more demand. What we've done is to bring Quebec into the automobile industry. So for me, that's one of the biggest successes in a century because Quebec wasn't part of that industry in the past. So now they will be. So yes, we're going to work to move this forward. Yes, I understand you, but I have to say when I look at the figures, there's a lot less processing that's happening in Quebec and in Canada now than was done in the past. And the prices have a lot to do with that. So, Mr. Minister, there are people working in the processing sector at home. There's a plant that's called STAS, and these people have been defending their ideas over the last 15 to 20 years. What could really help Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean would be to have an observatory on aluminum in the area that would allow us to have objective data in the same way as we have in the forestry sector. So today I can tell you how much 120 cubic feet of wood costs, but I can't do that for aluminum unless I look at the crude product. So what do you think of setting up an observatory for aluminum? Well, first of all, I'd like to say to those listening to us, Mr. Simard, that you've been a great defender of that concept. I talked about your idea to the government of Quebec with my colleagues there. And I think the idea exists, but I don't think there's the necessary consensus right now to go forward with that. I know you've defended that idea, and I'd like everyone to be aware of that. I'm listening to you because I know that you're a man with experience in the aluminum industry. I discussed this with my colleagues, but you can understand that as the federal government, in order for things to move forward, we have to have consensus among the stakeholders. And, of course, the Quebec government is an important one. I appreciate your honesty. Mr. Martel was talking earlier about the deadline. Mr. Pécré came here and told us what we already knew. When we look at Rio Tinto's annual reports, we can see that the deployment of this technology can't be done or achieved before 2030. So the retrofit, and of course, will not be done within the current plants either. And pardon me for the using the English word. For the AP60, it won't be possible to do it. So I'm wondering, there are people who've already worked in this sector who said that in the past, the federal government had an organization of specialists that were independent scientific researchers that could do that kind of study. So within the federal government, is there currently such a group of independent researchers who can look at the progress of this technology, this ELYSIS technology? Well, clearly we have various experts at the National Research Council, for example. But when you have a brand new technology such as this one, you'll have to agree with me, Mr. Simard, that when you change a process after 100 years, there are certain stages. So now we've gone from the lab to the first cells, and we've done this in line with the biggest players in the world in this industry. I was talking with the people who invented this technology, or at least implemented it. So there are costs for this development. I've discussed with Mr. Pécré and Mr. Thompson, and so you don't have to take it from me. Look at the committees when they did this with Apple or BMW, and they have BMW as a client now. So the point of no return has already been passed. So the issue is just being able to produce more, and I think that the workers are keen on this, and they say to me, give us time to produce more. Thank you very much. That's appreciated. Thank you. Mr. Massé, you have the floor.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Minister. First of all, I really appreciate your recognition of workers. it's important that you do that, and you've done that not only just here at this committee, but I've seen you in public statements and so forth. Coming from a union environment myself, where the workers negotiate, actually work, and they're sitting down at the table, we can support their public policy, but the skill set is there, and so really appreciate that, because some people like to take victory laps when things happen, and we should be focused on that, and it is attractive to the United States as well, fighting back our auto jobs. And I would give you credit for, like, we're on offense on auto, first time in the 20-plus years I've been here. So I do appreciate that, because usually what we're doing is we're having to come up and mop a spill or something else, and so I do appreciate that. I do want to ask, though, about one of the things I'm concerned about in the recent announcement that was made. It's not the announcement itself, but we might have workers that can't afford the vehicles that they're making. Similar to, we have people that are working in the grocery stores that can't afford certain things that are on the shelves that they're stocking. And the United States has incentives for electric vehicles at $7,500 US, which translates probably about 30,000 Canadian. No, I'm sorry, I'm just kidding. It's not 30,000 Canadian. It's probably about 10,000. And then so we have ours at 5,000. Then on top of that, they have a used incentive for 4,000. So they're going to be very assertively getting the vehicles into the market. And it seems that we always have money for the companies and the corporations. But we don't have in the province of Ontario any subsidy as well to our incentive for electric vehicle purchasing. They've abandoned theirs. And ironically, the minivan made in Windsor can get upwards of $15,000 to $20,000 bought in the U.S., depending on where you buy it, whereas in Canada, it can only get $5,000. So any thoughts about, and I've called for some reciprocity. We've talked about reciprocity in the auto sector, from bumpers to everything else. Any thought, I've asked for this government to look at some sort of reciprocity for Canadian consumers. And lastly, just to summarize, with the U.S. having a used 4K incentive, we could actually have a business, a cottage industry business, of shipping electric vehicles that are used out of Canada into the United States, lowering our target margins that we're trying to reach, because they're going to be able to get incentives on the vehicles than in the used market, because the vehicles are traded used back and forth along the border on a regular basis, and they will have a 4K U.S., which is probably about 6K Canadian. And we could actually be losing some of our threshold target markets.
Well, I want to say thank you, Mr. Basse, because when we talk about workers, we're on the same line. I think you and I have been acknowledging that. What makes Canada competitive today is that we have the best workers in the world. And you're right, every speech that I've been giving, every announcement, I always thank them, because at the end of the day, it starts with them, because the rest, if you don't have the talent, same thing in aluminum, same thing in car. I remember the first meeting I had with the chairman of Honda in Tokyo 2 years ago. I think I had a piece of paper that said that the Alliston plan was the best in all of his plan. And I said, trust our people. They're the best. And then, obviously, 2 years after, he said, I heard you, be patient. That was patience well invested. But to your point, I think we started with incentives for electric cars. I just want to put in perspective that when I became Minister of Industry, you will recall, one of the first briefings I received was basically preparing for the end of the auto sector in Canada, that we might follow suit with the UK and Australia. And I must say, thanks to what we did together, let's say as a nation, we turned that around. And now I was looking, I think it's since I just had a data since 2020, we had $46 billion of investment. And you're right, you come from Windsor. You've been fighting all your life for the workers. Remember at the time, we used to be at the table and hoping to get something. Now, Volkswagen, the first gigafactory outside of Germany, largest investment of Honda's history, Ford, GM, Stellantis. So to your point, we started with incentives for the car. I think, and I'm happy to study that, and if the committee wants to study other measures we can do. The other thing we're doing, we're trying to reduce the cost of the batteries, because at the end of the day, batteries are about 40% of the cost of an electric vehicle. So by regrouping the supply chain in Canada, what we're hoping also is that we'll be able to decrease the cost and make greener batteries, so that the cars would be more affordable, because there's an issue around affordability.
Yeah, but in the meantime, this is, again, and I appreciate all that, and I agree, actually. I still want a national auto policy. We're not there yet, but there's more policy than ever before, and we're not doing Hail Mary rescue plans. But again, to the consumers, though, what do we do? I mean, and I can't wait for a study in this committee, because you raised the C27 word. And that's going to take a long time in this committee. But in the meantime, you know, I'm not sure the government grasps the seriousness of our EV charging ports being deficient and compatible. And then second of all, Canadian consumers being outperformed by U.S. consumers with regards to incentives. And again, that's like, I mean, these are big margins. 5,000 Canadian versus, you know, 7,500 U.S. and with 4,000 for used batteries. Do you not think that there should be at least a department or some the government go on some type of a plan there? If you look at even the other nations in Europe, we're way behind. And so there's money for companies, but there's not for consumers.
Well, I would say we started with money for consumers, and I think we've been part of the equation. To your point, I think, you know, we will always be there for consumers. The companies, I think, is a great thing because, you know, I think people, rather than just buy them, they'd like to manufacture them. And as you say, this is a game changer for our nation because we used to basically get some of it. Now we are kind of the center. But I hear you, Mr. Massey. I think we're on the same side on that. I'd say we are happy to look at that. And if the committee wants to do a study after C27, because I still need your help to make sure we will protect the data of people and we'll have a framework on AI.
Before that, probably. But
well, I hope not, sir, because a lot of people are expecting that.
Well, yeah, I actually hope you, and I don't want to get into a big debate on that or whatever, but I hope you still consider splitting the bill so we can get some of it done and get through the House, but that's another thing. I want to quickly go over the time that I have is just there's a cut that's taking place in the budget, and I don't expect you to have all the knowledge on this, and it's okay if you need assistance of your staff there, but Federal Economic Development Agency for Southwestern Ontario is losing 47% of its budget. That's in the estimates, and so it's going down 47%. A lot of them are getting cut as well too. Just wondering, you know, where is that going to, I guess, fall from in terms of program services and so forth? This 47% is huge.
Mr. Chair, may I suggest, I thought we were on Rio Tinto, so by
Yes.
the time we have the question, we can answer perhaps in the second hour, if that's okay with you, Mr. Massey, so that the official can dig into that. Because
it's a great idea, Mr. Minister,
we can dig
because
into
you're out
that
of
in the
time,
meantime.
Monsieur Massey, so that'll give time for the officials to look for the answer. And as a reminder, colleagues, the first hour is meant to be on Rio Tinto, the second on mains, but I've been very liberal in my interpretation. So far,
he opened it up with
but
the
let's
state.
try to stick to the topic as much as possible. Monsieur
Okay.
Martel, la parole est à vous pour 5 minutes.
Fair enough.
Merci, Monsieur le
Yeah.
Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Minister, in your public investments for ELYSIS, we know that it benefits the major producers, but will this also be a benefit to our small and medium-sized businesses? I would say yes, but I think that first and foremost, it benefits a great many of your constituents because these investments are in order to maintain jobs at home for generations to come. I would tell you a sad story. In Shawinigan, we lost our Alcan plant, and I think that we are looking for good investments. That's what we're doing now. I don't see them just investments in companies, but in new technologies, and particularly it's an investment in the future for people. And because we're talking about individuals and families and communities. And so, yes, it's important for SMEs. If I recall the figures from Rio Tinto, they, in the major Saguenay and Lac-Saint-Jean area, they spend some hundreds of millions of dollars in a year. So we want to ensure the sustainability of those investments. So people who are looking at this today should be happy. Minister, Canadian aluminum is in great demand, but we're told it's expensive. So it might cost even more now. What's going to happen if China or other countries take over part of our market or market share because their product's so much cheaper? So how are you going to counter that? What's going to happen? Well, it's a very good question, Mr. Martel. I think that I think we have the cleanest aluminum in the world, and it'll be more the case in the future. I think the best way to make this sustainability last for people in Lac-Saint-Jean working in the industry is to adopt these new technologies, to continue with what we have today, but to invest in the future. Because, as I say, we had this plant at home, and it closed after 100 years. So what we're doing in Lac-Saint-Jean is that we're going to have the AP60 now. We'll have the new cells and pots. This new technology is going to be important because what I'm hearing from the major manufacturers And if you probably saw the BMW announcement, they say that they're going to buy aluminum from us for their cars they're building in the States. So for us, that's a great mark of the confidence they have in us. Well, the aluminum, can you assure us that our small and medium-sized businesses will be able to have access to that? Will there have access to that? Will our processors be able to have access to it? Because often they get there and they're the last ones on the list to be able to buy any. We know there's demand for it. Well, certainly they'll contribute to the project, but on the issue of sales, that's maybe more a question for the head of Rio Tinto. I don't have a look at their order book, but it's particularly to be able to make these jobs sustainable that we are projecting towards the future, looking at the future and saying that we'll have the greenest aluminum in the world. Well, Mr. Minister, you know that primary aluminum needs a great deal of energy to be created. And we're quite well aware of that, and that'll be the case in the future. So that for ELYSIS to work at home, we'll have to have a great deal more energy available. So how do you foresee this? You talked about Norvolt earlier, and this might be a major issue. Well, obviously, Rio Tinto has rights on a river that are historic. I think they're grandfathered. It goes back to Mr. Duplessis' time. But in Quebec, I think you don't have to listen to me. I think it's well known that in Quebec, you and I are from the same generation. We thought that the right to electricity it would be infinite. But now we are waking up and saying that, well, there is a limited capacity and choices have to be made. So I saw decisions that had to be made in terms of energy production, and clearly we're going to have to look at them for the future. So the biggest competitiveness in Quebec is from Quebec. So anybody who wants to decarbonize, they look to us. People want to produce in jurisdictions that are green, and Quebec is the greenest jurisdiction in North America. So we're attracting a lot, and the Government of Canada is trying to see how we can help. So the credits that we put into the federal budget are going to help companies in Quebec to put forward projects. Last question, please. How do you stay aware of the geopolitical situation in real time in order to take the best decisions? Well, listen, I'm in close contact with the head of the CEO of Rio Tinto. I would say that we have somewhere between 2 and 6 meetings per year. This is a person who texts me regularly, and I text him too, so we have this nice relationship. It allows us to work in symbiosis and know what's on the horizon and how we can position Canada the best. So don't take it from me. He himself said that they are really investing more and more in Canada, and that shows a great deal of confidence in us and in the workers that we have in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean. Thank you very much. And now I give the floor to Mr. Van Bynen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, I know that we're only talking about investments in the millions of dollars, but dating that back to May 2018, I believe there's about $80 million from the federal government matched by the province and also by Rio Tinto. At that time, it was quite a substantial investment. Why did the government choose to invest in ELYSIS?
Thank you, Mr. Van Byden. It's great to see you, and I hope translation works fine. Why? Because that was the technology of the future. I would say when you're looking at what they're doing, it is, like I was saying, probably the biggest transformation in the industry in a century. And as we did in AI, as we did in quantum, the place for Canada is to be at the leading edge of these new technologies so that we can ensure prosperity for the next few generations, And we knew that, everyone is trying to decarbonize aluminum, steel, the production of semiconductors. And, what we have achieved in that is to create an ecosystem in Canada that is conducive to investments. That's why you've seen Bloomberg, which now rank Canada first in the world, ahead of China, for the battery ecosystem. And the fact that Canada ranked third in the world in 2023 for foreign direct investment. The first was the United States, the second Brazil, and third was Canada. So the fact that we've decided to be the green supplier of choice to the world has attracted record level of investment. And you know the good news, Mr. Van Biden, I even have more projects to announce. So Canadians listening tonight should be rejoicing because there's more to come. Canada's attractive. We have the best worker. And we're going to push to make sure that we are the jurisdiction of choice in the 21st century.
Good. And it's great to hear that that strategy is bringing the investments forward that we're seeing today. But my curiosity is around how did the government assess the feasibility of the project in going forward as they were making that investment analysis?
Well, I want to give the credit to the Deputy Minister and our fine civil service. You know, we have some of the best people to do the due diligence. As you know, when you invest public funds, you have to go through a very rigorous due diligence process. A couple of things give us faith in the technology. The fact that you have two of the largest aluminum producers in the world, Rio Tinto and Alcoa, that you have customers like Apple, which was part of the original program that was announced. The fact that when we met the scientists behind that, they said this is where the puck is going, and we're Canadians, so we like to go where the puck is going. So when you put all that together, and the fact that the company is investing significant amount of money in that, give us the confidence, plus the due diligence we did, that this was the way to go, and the best way to protect jobs for generations to come.
And I know that projects like this evolve over time, and we've seen some changes in the timelines. Has ELYSIS informed the government of the current timelines for deploying this new technology and scaling up?
Well, that's a very good question. I know the committee had the privilege to get the CEO of Rio Tinto Aluminum, Mr. Pécresse, which was here. Like you know, when you move from the labs to the shop floor and you start scaling the production, obviously, I think, you know, when you see these kind of investments, which are transformational, the schedule sometimes moves a bit depending on how quickly you can scale. But I have all confidence that, you know, they will be producing on track as soon as possible. And you need to make sure that as you go to the different step, you know, there's kind of a critical path to achieve what you want to achieve, that they're doing that. They have some of the best experts in the world. Like I said, you have two champion, the two largest, well, among the two largest companies in the world working together on that. I think we have, you know, the best people to do that. So I'm very confident that the exact timeline, as Mr. Pécresse said, it's very difficult because you have new technology. This is a breakthrough after a century, so this is not a small thing to achieve. But I know that the destination is that we're going to be the first producer and the largest producer of green aluminum, and I think we should all be proud of that.
It's great to see the sponsorship and the depth of the investors that has built the confidence. Is the government at all concerned about the delays this far, or do you feel like it's moving along as quickly as is reasonable?
I think you said it. I have confidence. I think it's moving as quickly as possible. All the feedback I received from the companies, from the workers that I met, indicates that. So I have faith. And, you know, they already have customers sign up, some of the biggest ones, BMW, they have Apple. So they have all incentives in the world to deliver. And like I said, they even told me, they said, Minister, you keep talking about us around the world. Give us the time to produce because you're selling more than we can produce now. So I think it's a great place to be, and we'll continue to support them because I believe in the workers and I believe in us being in a leading position.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup, monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Van Bynen. That is the time that you have. And now I'll give the floor to Mr. Simard for 2.5 minutes. Thank you. Mr. Champagne, I'm going to leave here with a bit less of a burden on my shoulders. And if I rely on what you've said, there will be more investments in ELYSIS soon. And if I see that happen and you are in my region, I would be very pleased to offer you a beer from a microbrewery in Lac-Saint-Jean. So I thank you for that confirmation that will make many people happy at home. Now, you know that ELYSIS technology means that the replacement of the anodes will be done much less frequently. And so that means fewer jobs. So I think the people on the committee at home have thought about that. And we came to the conclusion, all of us, that the best solution for us, I mean, we understand that we can't think of aluminum as we did in the past with the same thresholds for employment. But the best thing for us is to ensure that these anodes be made in Quebec. In your investments and participation in ELYSIS, is there any idea of making this conditional, that the main components should be manufactured in Quebec as far as possible? Well, I might come back to the comment you made about jobs. I still have the trauma of the plant that closed in my riding after 100 years. Choices were made, and I can tell you that when we want to keep jobs and create more, we have to ensure that we are using leading-edge technology. It's clear that there's changes in the technology, but by analogy, I would say that it's the same thing in the auto industry. When we move from internal combustion engines, there's a transformation that's happening, a transition, and I think to stay ahead of that curve is the best way to ensure. Well, I agree with you, but it has to be planned. And so with those changes, we would all be winners if there's participation of the public. I don't think it's not outlandish to ask that in return there be some considerations taken by Rio Tinto to ensure that components that are used be manufactured in Quebec. Is that part of your thinking? Well, it's always part of my thinking, yes, because when we make these major investments, and it's the same thing in the auto industry, we always try to promote local. We always want to promote regional economic development, and I think I'd be pleased to hear you more on this, but I think Rio Tinto is a good player in that regard. We're talking about over $500 million investment in the community and in local purchases. So when I heard that from them, I think there's different components to building these plants, but there's clearly a desire to promote locally. Thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Massey.
Maybe we could ask the clerk to put a sign on the door for people to close it and gently. Probably is hurting the translators as well too. It's very, very loud, and that's when we're supposed to be doing this to help the translators. But I can only imagine what they're hearing through the door being. Yeah, they're looking at them right now. So yes. So thank you. If we could just put a sign on the door. At any rate, just with regards to the incentives that are provided in aluminum, that we had a situation in Windsor, and I did get a satisfactory response from one of your previous officials, but I do want to follow up on this because I can't let it go. It's on NEMAC in Windsor, where it was provided federal funds by then by the province of Ontario, but also the federal government, Navdeep Bains. What ended up happening is that we had the incentive go to them, then they took that money, made a product for the auto sector, then took that innovation and took it to basically Mexico and closed down operations. And the union actually had to go to court recently winning to get back wages. So what we did is we funded the innovation in Canada. They took it out and brought it to Mexico, and we lost all those jobs. And so are there enough qualifiers in the incentive with regards to the aluminum project to ensure that we don't have any of that taking place?
Well, listen, I can assure you, and I just want to add to Mr. Massey, Mr. Chair, I was looking at the translator, which are doing a superb job. I think they were praying for us to put a sign on the door because that is a real issue that they're flagging to me because I could see them through the window. But going back to the question of Mr. Massey, I think that what you will see today, we are very much looking forward. I appreciate that I cannot really comment specifically on that transaction because I don't have the detail, but I can assure you that in all the agreements we're doing, we're making sure that we maximize jobs in Canada. We maximize the creation and retention of IP. I think we have become far more sophisticated to make sure that any public support would be coupled with the right, I would say, undertakings to make sure that we protect. I think everyone realized that the IP is key now, that we need to keep the knowledge in the IP. And I can tell you in all the agreements that I've seen, there's always provision around IP because we understand how crucial it is. But if you want more detail on that transaction, I would have to turn to the officials.
I've raised it ad nausea because it's really affected many people. They were workers in their 40s and 50s that missed out on their pensionable years, and so it was really horrific. I mean, they already took 2 pay cuts to keep the jobs in Canada. We came in with money and we were reassured that this wouldn't happen. So I just keep raising it because I don't want that to happen to another community. I literally know the faces of the people that try to get a job when you're 40, 50, and you've already taken $10 off of your wage. In 2 different times. So that's the end of my questions, Mr. Chair. I just don't want that to be a story for somewhere else.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Massé. Alors, on va...
Thank you very much, Mr. Massé. We'll suspend for 2 minutes, and then we'll resume on the main estimates. Thank you.
Chers collègues, on va reprendre.
Okay, colleagues, we're going to reconvene the meeting. People can ask the minister of the questions that they have for him. So the second hour is on the estimates. And as the minister has already made his observations, we'll start with questions.
Entendez pas? Okay.
Pour 6 minutes.
Colleagues in the back, please. For 6 minutes, Rick Perkins, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister. It's a long way away down there. I'd like to start by asking you, I think about the year or the month before you were appointed minister, so about 40 months ago, of industry, that is, your predecessor, your government, allocated another $750 million towards the towards SDTC, which the public knows as the Green Slush Fund. Is that correct?
Listen, we would have to check the record, but one thing I would object is that I don't think Canadians would say that. If you're saying that, you're probably insulting 500 Canadian companies which are in the tech sector, but that's up to you, Mr. Perkins, because I don't think...
That's what the record shows on the budget. So I'm curious, during the 40 months that you've been the minister of the Green Slush Fund, your ADM, Andrew Noseworthy, was in every single board meeting that it had. Did he ever report to you the numerous votes that the board had in what they called managed conflict, voting to themselves money? In the case of Andre Lise-Matteau, $42 million to that Liberal appointee to the company she had a venture capital interest in. Did that deputy minister, or the assistant deputy minister, I know was before Mr. Kennedy, ever report to you about those? And some of it happened under Mr. Kennedy as well.
Well, for the record, I don't think Canadians would describe it the way you're saying. But one thing Canadians need to know, to answer your question, this is STC was created by law of Parliament, sir. I just want you to be aware of that. The Government of Canada does not control the board. The Government of Canada appoints a number of people on the board. They have their own board. They have their own chair. They have their own CEOs. And that's why Parliament at the time wanted to make sure that they would be independent.
Point of order.
Mr. Perkins, Mr. Turnbull. On a point
Well,
of
I
order.
know it's customary for members to have their time, and I think I totally respect that Mr. Perkins wants to ask his line of questioning. I would just ask that maybe the minister could finish his response. I think that's just the due respect when we have ministers come before committee, is just to allow them to finish their response.
Mr. Perkins, you don't have the floor. I agree, Mr. Turnbull, and at the same time, I'll ask the minister to try to keep his answers brief, given that members have limited time. But I agree with your point, Mr. Turnbull. Mr. Perkins.
If you could keep your answers to about the length of my questions, so we can get through it in my limited time. So I would ask you again, because the government, which you're a part of, appoints 8 of the board members who hold a majority, including Andre Lise-Matteau, which your government appointed, who actually voted herself $42 million. I had the board vote it. So it's a simple question, was any of that reported to you before it broke in the media?
I would say, just for the record and Canadians watching, the Government of Canada does not appoint the majority. I would say Mr. Perkins should go read the law. This is not an agency of government. This is a creation of Parliament. And the Government of Canada does not appoint a majority of the board members.
Question,
no,
were you, yes or no, informed about the votes in the board from your assistant deputy minister, who was in every board meeting, that they were voting money for their own companies, yes or no?
Well, what I'm educating you is about the composition of the board, because Canadians who are watching need to know the facts. The facts is that this is a creation of Parliament. It's not an agency of the Government of Canada. And the way Parliament wanted to do it. Now, just so you know the background. Mr.
I know
Perkins,
the background. I know how to read. And,
I'm not sure you were not there at Parliament at the time.
Look, it's easy to read the history of the thing. So it was a simple question which you're refusing to answer. So obviously they didn't inform you. You froze the money. Is that correct, because of the scandal that's going on?
No. I did what any respectful manager would do. The first thing, when I was made aware of issues with respect to this to STDC, I suspended funding. We also demanded the resignation of the board and the chair. We called for an investigation to make sure, because I believe, listen, I was director of ethics in my previous job before Parliament, sir. I know exactly what to do in those circumstances, and we applied the best practice. And now we're cooperating with the Auditor Generals as we should do.
You're here with regard to the estimates. You suspended the funding, yet the estimates that have been tabled in Parliament for this fiscal year allocate another $191 million to the Green Slush Fund, which you have suspended because of suspicion of corruption of directors. Why, as minister, would you have gone and tried to get another $191 million for this corrupt organization?
I don't know which organization you're referring to.
The Green Slush Fund, SDTC.
Which one of the two are you referring to?
The same thing. It's the same thing. So
I don't understand your question then, sir.
It's a simple question. Why did you get another
I don't understand
$191
your
million
question.
for
So
SDTC?
tell me which entity you're referring to.
I did. SDTC. Why did you ask for another $191 million?
We need to make sure that whilst this company, and by the way, I am surprised about the nature of the question, because this is an entity, and I hope you're going to have witnesses that says what they did. 500 companies. I'm sure there's some in Nova Scotia that
With
like
all due
to hear
respect,
from
I
you
asked a simple
that-
question, and all of
I'm
them you've
giving you a
refused to
simple
answer. So I'm going to move on. The Net Zero Accelerator Fund, how much carbon has that reduced for the $8 billion you've spent?
You mean how much we produce? We don't produce carbon.
How much has the Net Zero Accelerator reduced carbon as per its goal in the $8 billion you've spent?
Yeah. Well, first of all, if you want to talk about the Net Accelerator Fund, it's a great thing because it has allowed to decarbonize a number of industry in the country. We talk about aluminum, we talk about steel.
Carbon has it done? Because the Auditor General said you don't track a single dollar, a single carbon emission in the report that was out last week. Are you telling me the department tracks it in a way that the Auditor General can't find?
Well, it's not the Auditor General, by the way.
He works as part of the Auditor General's office. Perhaps I could explain that to you.
So what's the question again?
The question again is how much carbon did it reduce? It reduced nothing. So why would you sign $8 billion of contracts of taxpayer money and you don't track any of the carbon released by the Net Zero Accelerator?
Well,
according to the Auditor General's office, not to me.
But the fund does not create carbon, so I don't understand your question. The fund is about reducing carbon, sir.
The fund, and it hasn't reduced any according to the Auditor General's
listen,
office.
I would respectfully disagree with that. If you look at the investments...
Will you table the documents that disagree with the Auditor General, please?
Mr. Perkins, you've asked the Minister to use about as much time as you take for your questions to answer. You've used about 35 seconds for your question. Minister, if you want to answer, and that's all the time you had, Mr. Perkins. So I'll let a bit of time to the Minister for his answer, and then we'll move on.
Well, I think I've answered. We don't agree with all the conclusion. We said what the report was focusing was in one pillar. One of the other pillars about the battery manufacturing ecosystem in Canada. And I would say now Bloomberg ranked us first in the world ahead of China. So if you remove politics from that, Mr. Perkins, you would say Canada is great. Canada has attracted more investments than we have ever seen in the auto sector, sir. And that is decarbonizing. We're talking about green steel, green aluminum. We're the envy of the world, Mr. Perkins. Let's be proud. Think about Michelin in your riding. Do you want me to talk about Michelin, a great company I visited, which we supported?
You're called the Auditor General's
thank you, colleagues.
Net Accelerator Fund.
We'll end it there. Thank you, Mr. Perkins. And I will now move it to Mr. Sorbara for 6 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And welcome, Minister. And welcome, Mr. Kennedy. If we can get back to the main estimates and the funds that will be used to invest in Canadian companies and also companies that are coming to Canada and help grow our economy, especially in some exciting sectors. Mr. Minister, I wanted to speak to the semiconductor industry. On the 26th of April, you joined the Prime Minister to announce the federal government's $59.9 million investment into the $226.5 million expansion of IBM's semiconductor packaging plant in Bromont, Quebec, and to support R&D in quantum technologies. Minister, why is investing in this type of a project good for Quebec's economy, good for Canada's economy, and good for the entire supply chain when it comes to highly value-added manufacturing in the semiconductor industry?
Well, I'd like to thank Mr. Sorbara, and for the record, he's one of our very best, having been in Wall Street and Bay Street. One of the things that Canadians may not know is that Canada package and test about 80% of all the semiconductor which are manufactured in North America. And you would appreciate that part of my mission has been to make sure that Canada would be integrated in these key strategic supply chain. I even flagged at the time that I was thinking we should replicate what we've been doing between Detroit and Windsor to have this corridor between Albany and Bromont. Because in fact, if you look at the CHIPS Act in the United States and the investment that they've been making, my point to our American friends is always about resiliency of supply chain. And I said, you have your best ally and partner and friend just up north, which package 80% of every semiconductor which is manufactured in North America, mainly in the United States. So I was saying, and the President Biden, when he came to the House of Commons, made the point that we have a very integrated supply chain when it comes to semiconductors. So this was a great investment because for us, it allowed us to keep our leading position. We want to make sure that we can be a trusted, reliable, and significant partner to the United States. And the fact that we invested to modernize, because packaging and testing is far more than what people believe. Packaging is not about wrapping. It's really how many semiconductors you can put on a wafer. It is the most advanced technology you can find in the world. And we're very fortunate that we have that capacity in Canada. The plant of IBM was opened in 1962 in Bromont. And by the way, it's the largest packaging and testing plant in the world of IBM. And this is in Canada. So the investment that we're doing to be able to have a very stable and integrated supply chain with our American colleagues, I think is kind of the foresight we need. We are doing that in semiconductors. We've done that in the battery ecosystem. We're doing that in aluminum. That's the way you build, a growth plan for North America.
Just on a second tangent, Minister, Budget 2024 obviously made some major investments in artificial intelligence, which is really going to define not only Canada's economy but the world economy going forward for decades to come, I would say. On another tangent, though, and you can touch upon both, Minister, in your career, you worked in Europe for a number of years and then came back to Canada. I have the privilege of being the chair of the Canada-Europe Parliamentary Association. Tomorrow is actually Europe Day, and we'll be celebrating that this evening. As a part of ISED's 24-25 departmental plan, we'll be strengthening our international scientific collaboration through Horizon Europe and the European Commission's nearly $100 billion research, 100 billion euro research and innovation funding program. Canada is now a partner on that. And Minister, through your international experience and now your experience as industry minister, can you expand on the opportunities that are available for Canadian companies, Canadian researchers, in partnering with through Horizon Europe and our European friends and allies?
Well, this is a very good question, and thank you. This is something all Canadians should be proud. Canada is the only non-European country which has been invited to join Horizon Europe, which is the largest R&D endeavor, I would say, research project that you see in Europe. And Canada has been invited to be part of that, which is a great thing because if you ask our researchers and scientists around the country, they tell you to be part of that great endeavor. I think it's a program of around $180 billion in research, and Canada being the only non-European country to be part of that. It's really good news for our universities across the nation, for our scientists, for our researchers, because we're going to be able to pursue joint projects with our European friend. And you've seen in the last budget, I always say the science of today is the economy of tomorrow. And for us to be part of that, to build for the future, our mission here as Member of Parliament is to deal with today, but also build for the future. So what we've done, for example, in the budget where we had about $3.5 billion around science, for me, this was really something that everyone should rejoice in the country. We've been the government which invested the most in 2016, you will remember, we've invested significantly. Now we're investing in AI. We're making sure that there would be $1.8 billion for grants, the different granting agencies in the country. And also there'd be like $800 million to support, those who are doing master, PhD, and beyond. So I think that what you're seeing is Canada leading where it matters, which is in science and research, and what we've done in the budget is a good indication of that.
Chair,
You're just out of time, Mr. Sorber. Thank you very much. Monsieur Garon, la parole est à vous.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Ministre. Hello, Mr. Minister. I heard you say earlier with the mic off that you found my conservative colleague's tone a bit tough, but I think you're not the only one who was subjected to that this week. So we have many good questions to ask of you. Thank you for being here for 2 hours. To your knowledge, in Quebec, how many companies are making electric school buses? Well, I'm aware of 2, but there are perhaps more. I'm aware of Lyon, and the other one, I can't recall the name, though I made the announcement. The name will come back to me. But with age, sometimes, you know, that's that happens. Well, you're still young, and you have a great career ahead of you still. How many companies building electric school buses exclusively? That's a good question. I think there's just one. Yes, and that's Lyon. I think so. So if there's a federal fund, so let's invent a fiction that would be a federal fund for zero-emission transport vehicles. So let's say there are 3,000 projects in the queue, and so there are all those people waiting, and the transport companies that want to buy those vehicles can't agree with Ottawa on a price that will make those buses affordable. Would you find that acceptable? Well, I can tell you that I'm having active discussions with Marc Bédard, who's my colleague in Quebec on this file, and we talked about the viability of Lyon in the long term, and we are in discussions with them because, you know, it's an issue of where you set the bar. So there's a limited fund. If you give a bigger subsidy, there might be fewer buses, and so, Mr. Chairman might accept that I interrupt you if I do so politely. I know that Lyon recently came out and said that there are 3,000 projects that are waiting. They haven't delivered any buses in the last couple of years with that fund. So we recognize everything that you're doing for Lyon and the industry. You're active on this file, but at the same time, there were 150 jobs left, and another 120 more recently. A lot. And Lyon is a company that we're so proud of. Have you talked to the Minister of Infrastructures about this? Because sometimes when that minister gets involved, things move forward more quickly. Well, we're having discussions with Lyon and the government of Quebec and with my colleagues. I'm well aware of this because I talk to them often. So now we're seeing with the province of Quebec to see how their envelope should be deployed. I'm in contact with them. And we're all active on this because, you know, that the other minister and I have worked very hard on success of Lyon. So now, in order to ensure the sustainability of this, there might be more that we can say within 5 minutes. The amounts involved, what's available, how do we divide that per province and per bus? Well, Minister, how is it? There are 2 components to my question, 2 elements. A similar program in California has been able to give money within 3 months to those who want to buy those buses, and Canada, we haven't been able to unblock any of it. So is that how we do the transition? Because when a company buys a bus, it doesn't buy it for 6 months. It will be for 15 years. Well, it's a little more complex than that. If you talk to your colleagues, the way in which they're going to use the provincial component of that, it's Quebec's fault? No, I'm working with Mr. Legault always, but there's no fault here. We're just trying to see what funds are available, and there's nobody's fault here. It's a question of allocation of resources, and there are discussions with the partners involved here. Lyon, ourselves, the province of Quebec, we're all active on the file. Well, I think that you understand that we use the committee sometimes to get our message through, and I think it's important that we look at this with the Minister of Infrastructure. I think the intentions are good, but I've heard a lot about this at home. Many people are worried about it, and it's just a way of getting you to think about this more. I think I have about a minute and a half left, so I imagine that within your binder you have a page on copyright. the publishing industry in Quebec for years has been asking for this act to be updated. We still haven't seen that. We have C-27, and obviously there are issues involved there with copyright, but also the fact that teaching institutions are not paying for authors' works and in a fair value. So I don't want you to give me a resume of what you're doing like you did with Lyon, but in terms of work that is protected and with artificial intelligence, can we expect something here soon? Well, we're talking to a lot of people in the domain of artificial intelligence and copyright, and you're quite right, that concerns a great many people. For the more general issue, I can reassure you that I've met with people in the industry, and I've met with my colleague on this. There is work to be done. There are the authors we need to speak to in the universities. We're trying to find a way, how can I say this, to find a solution that's fair to everyone and equitable. Well, the question is, are you drafting legislation for AI? Is it happening? Are we moving forward, backwards? Are we going to find ourselves in elections without anything having been done? Well, it's rare that we go backwards, but there are several things that we have to consider here. If it was a simple solution, it would already be done. But I encourage, are you working on a bill right now? Are we going to have this before the committee? Well, what we're doing right now is consulting and discussing with people, but I invite you to consult everyone in the industry because I understand the situation very well. As I say, there are different partners involved, and you have to listen to everyone's voices to find a just and a fair and equitable solution. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. So at the speed with which things are going, allow us to finish C-27 first. Mr. Massey, you have the floor.
Last time, Southern Ontario Federal Economic Development Agencies being cut by 47%. Tell me what's kind of going out or what's changing there. 47% is the steepest cut of all the agencies by far. There's a bunch of others, so kind of what's happening there?
Let me just say, and I'll turn to the Deputy Minister because thanks to your question, we had a bit of time to look. But I would say Southwestern Ontario, like Windsor, I would say, Mr. Massey, you would agree with me, the investment we've done with Stellantis and Nexstar are generational. There's been a lot of money going in the region. And I think thanks to you, the work we've done together, Windsor is never going to look the same, I would think, for generations because of that. But more specifically to your question, because my point is that there's been a lot of federal money going to Windsor, but the fact about the detail of that, I'm happy to leave the Deputy Minister to give you a more detailed answer.
Sure, thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, maybe just first to note that there was a time when all the regional agencies were part of the industry portfolio, but actually that's changed. So that agency is now the responsibility of another minister and deputy. So the detailed questions I wouldn't really be in a position to answer. We did look at this year's kind of planning report from the agency, and it appears to be the end of a COVID emergency relief program, a fairly substantial one, and so the budget is kind of returning to its longer-term kind of run rate, and that's in the documentation that FedDev has made available publicly. So we think that's what's happened here.
Yeah, no, and that's fair enough. I'll try to follow that up as well too. I just said it's in our estimates here through the department. Just a little bit worried because tool and die mold making, others that are, sometimes forgotten, and they require long-term commitments. So, and that's fine. Yeah, no, we actually have done really well. We got the Gordie Howe Bridge just about we're done. Urban Park, which I want next to it, and a whole series of things. So. But it's come with a lot of sweat equity and business case scenarios to prove that it's worth it for the rest of the country. So Canadian Tourism Commission, one issue is that it is getting a small raise. And the reason I'm asking about this is because since it moved to Vancouver, it's pretty well disappeared from Parliament here. And duty-free stores are being hit hard. And the traffic for American visitation is significantly down on the land borders. Air traffic is really way up, but land border traffic is way down. They moved to more international attempts to increase visitation, and that was the expense of an American plan. And so duty-free is suffering. Others are suffering. Any thoughts of getting the Canadian Tourism Commission more active in its promotions to the United States, especially given that land border crossings are significantly down not only just in my region, but Niagara Falls and other places across the country. Tourism is being hit real hard from that. It's, again, airlines way up, car traffic's way down.
No, and I know, I'd just say the deputy may want to add to that, but I would say tourism is one of the key economic sector in many regions. I mean, I come from rural Canada. This is key, and to your point, we always need to make sure. It's an industry I believe very much in, and we need to support it. We've done that in the past. We'll continue. But more specifically to your question, I may ask the deputy to give you the detailed numbers.
Mr. Chair, I might suggest that we come back with a written response. I'd be very happy to do that. I don't have enough kind of data myself to be able to answer that appropriately. But
that's fine. I'd rather do it that way anyways. Okay. I'm looking for suggestions on how to improve it, but it's really hurting significantly. Small, medium-sized businesses in particular, like again, air traffic's out of the roof with regards to, but land border traffic's significantly down. And I quite frankly, when we moved it to Vancouver, I predicted it would disappear from this place in terms of importance. I might be on the record of asking the only question in this session about the Canadian Tourism Commission. That's how poorly it's now represented in that. Now, with regards to the other parts of the estimates I do want to ask about is the Competition Bureau. I was really happy to see that they published their annual business plan, and one of the things I've been working is fraud prevention, and they're getting more into that. I couldn't find it in the estimates myself. Is their budget being increased for the Competition Bureau? Because their role is changing, thank goodness, to positive, and needs more changing. Are they getting more resources with this budget?
Well, I would say thanks to this committee and the government and your support, we have made the largest reform in competition law, as you know, since its creation. And one of the things I'm looking prior to my career as minister, but I would say enforcement is key. You can have any laws on the book, but at the end of the day, and I think that was the most significant thing we did, was to provide in 2023 a significant means to the commissioner. And I think you see even public statements about him to say that was key, because you can change the law, but what we need now is means in order to achieve the mission we've given them, the market studies and all that. I remember in 2023 it was tens of millions that we gave to the agency, and I think, I don't have all the records in front of me, but I would think this is one of the largest investment that we've done in the competition commissioner. And now with the reform that we've done on competition, I think the nation will be much better equipped now to tackle the competition issues.
I'd be, again, if we could follow up with more details. Like this file's huge, so I don't expect you to have like this. There's no file like the industry file on the Hill here, so I don't expect you to have the details of all the different. But these are specifics I've been going after. Like we had the first fraud study here. I guess, but if I can follow up with this, though, is there any thought in terms of how using of regulation, cell phones right now, like it's unbelievable the amount of fraud that comes through your personal device. You know, you pay for the personal device, you pay for this connection to it. The companies of the telcos still continually do a terrible job of blocking. You know, and the CRTC has put in some new policies, but they've not been effective. Even the most recent check distribution for the carbon tax was a fraud scam that came through as well, too. Any thoughts in terms of bringing more accountability to the telcos with regards to their allowance and participation, quite frankly, of keeping the status quo, which is the abuse of people, especially seniors, persons with disabilities, and those not familiar with it on fraud?
Well, I'd say a couple of things on that. Certainly, we're always trying to find ways to promote consumers' interests, but you will be happy. In the last budget, there was an issue around making sure there's no switching fee, the famous $50 that we were seeing. And the other thing, I think, which is going to make one of the most significant difference was informing consumers that there might be a cheaper plan that they would be able to choose from. And I think information is key because, you know, I'll give you my personal experience sometimes. People say, well, the information is there, but most consumers don't check their plan on a weekly basis, you know. So the fact that they would do that, and now that there would be proactive information and disclosure that there'll be a cheaper plan or, you know, another option for consumer, I think we're going in.
And I appreciate that. Those are changes that are important, but I'm talking about them allowing fraud to be such a dominant part of their operations, especially that it still continues to exist. I guess I can ask for further follow-up on that as well, too. I mean, I agree, and I do appreciate the things that have changed. What about roaming charges? What about eliminating roaming charges in Canada from the corporations that are doing this. I mean, it's terrible if you live along the border. It's atrocious in terms of the difference between what we pay for roaming in the United States and other places. We're totally out of whack with those. What's your opinion on the current context of the telcos when it comes to roaming charges and what they're doing to Canadians?
Looking at everything to make life better for consumers. I know that there's some plans today that have waived roaming charges or have reduced them. But you know, the challenge we have in this country is that there are so many plans for consumers to know. That's why, for me, information is going to be key to make sure consumer can plus apply market pressure, and we will do our part like we've done. As you've seen me, I've been probably one of the most active on this file. Think about the TTC in Toronto, making sure 2 million people would have access to cell phone. But we'll continue, and if the committee has suggestion, I'm always happy to look at that, and you've been a good partner in that to try always to find ways that we can make life better for consumers.
I think that regulating roaming charges would be good. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Massey. We'll now turn to MP Williams for 5 minutes.
Minister, nice to see you again, sir. The Deputy Prime Minister was on record stating that companies are choosing Canada because we have a price on carbon. And she said specifically that because of our policies, we're getting more investment in Canada. But after 4 years, sir, after COVID specifically, we're starting to see some data that really contrasts that statement. Specifically, when we look at the Americas, we like to compare ourselves to our friends in the South and to Mexico. But if we look at, for instance, Canada's GDP per capita, so that's the amount of wealth that Canadians would hope to have, what we're seeing is that Canada's GDP per capita is going down, Mexico's is going up, and the USA's is going way up. And neither of those nations have a price on carbon. It's so bad that Mexico just became the United States' largest trading partner, a title that we used to have, when we're actually dropped to number 3. So the USA, it goes Mexico, then China, and then Canada. Why do we not give relief to companies in Canada that want to compete, ensuring that they don't have a carbon tax when a lot of these companies are trying to develop clean technology to compete and in order to create great paychecks for Canadians?
Well, I'm very delighted you asked that question. I think it's a great moment to celebrate Canada. In fact, if you look at foreign direct investment in the world, the United States was first in 2023, Brazil was second, Canada was third. If you put that on a per capita basis, we have been the champion in the world. And I think, just to correct the record for those watching at home, if you include goods and services, Canada is the largest trading partner of the United States. It's more than $1 trillion. And we are the largest market for 35 states in the United States. We buy more and we exchange more from the United States than any country in the world. So I think we should celebrate. And the other thing you should be happy to see is that we have seen some of the most historic investment. Think about, I'll give you, for example, Dow Chemical. Dow Chemical has made the largest investment in 125 years history or thereabout in Fort Saskatchewan in Alberta. If you look at BHP, Jensen in Saskatchewan, which was phase 1, was the largest project in BHP's history, and phase 2 was the second largest. That's $21.1 billion that has been invested in Saskatchewan. My point to say that, just to finish, Mr. Williams, is that to say, I think investors are voting with their feet, and the fact that you had Honda recently, the largest investment in their history, there must be something in Canada good, sir, because otherwise these people would not put all their money. I know it's about workers. I know it's about ecosystem. I know it's about renewable energy.
And thank you, Minister, but the stats simply do not say that. When we look at investments of assets by private businesses, Canada has stayed flat. So we talk about a productivity problem. We're not seeing businesses invest in their own companies. Well, Mexico is up 16% and the U.S. is up 31%. So this is a made-in-Canada problem. When we look at companies that have had, and I'm just going to look at Quebec, for instance, we've had losses to Mexico, Bombardier, Gildan Activewear, Sherwood, who actually went to China, Fruit of the Loom, Villon. All of these companies have offshored. So when we look at carbon tax, and we've talked to companies, they say they're being punished for that. We're just simply offshoring our emissions to other countries. So what do we do to ensure that we look at Mexico, I think, who is an example right now? Even if you look at the Mexican peso versus the Canadian dollar, they're gaining on us. The peso is gaining on it. Sir, I know you went to the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I think maybe you should have instead went to the Informed Presidential to learn a thing or two. What do we do to catch Mexico in this economic quagmire?
Thanks for the question. By the way, I was in Nebraska over the weekend with the governor, Jim Pellin. You may ask him what he thinks about Canada, and you would have seen in the social media and what we've been doing. Honestly, you want to talk about Quebec. I mean, we landed the largest investment in Quebec's history. Northvolt has decided to invest that's the largest investment in the province history since the last time we had hydroelectricity made. Look about Volta, a Korean company which has invested close to $1 billion to do separator. I mean, in a sense, Mr. Williams, I think the records speak for themselves. I'll just tell you that Bloomberg, don't take it from me because I know you're a man of the world, but Bloomberg now ranked Canada first, ahead of China for the battery ecosystem for the next 30 years, not me. And I did not even give them an interview. They came onto that conclusion by themselves. But Canada is ahead of China for the next 30 years, according to Bloomberg. We've been winning, sir. We've just been celebrating. We should be looking
Minister,
and saying,
I'm
let's
so
seize
sorry.
the moment. Let's celebrate.
You want to celebrate, only have so much
celebrate.
time, though. Minister, on grocery prices, on October 5th, 2023, you said that grocery prices would stabilize in days or weeks. Minister, I'm sure you're aware that when Canadians go to the grocery store, beef is up 30%, bread is up 14%, baby food's up 26%. Grocery prices are still staying stubbornly high when you said that they would be stabilized or stay low. Minister, when are grocery prices going to come down?
Fighting every day for consumers, and I'm sure you would if you were in my position, because we know that and if you want to help, because people are watching that at home, be on my side and push for a grocery code of conduct. Let's bring fairness and transparency. That's what the Independent Grocers Association of Canada is asking. And I'm still pushing to bring a foreign grocer in this country because we know more competition will bring more prices, better prices, better choices for consumers. And our reform of competition is the best way to make sure that we have more stability in prices in this country. That's what Canadians want. That's what I'm fighting for every day.
Thank you, Minister. MP Van Bynen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'd like to stay with this theme around competition. In April, the Competition Bureau of Canada published its 24-25 annual plan. I think it was called Onwards and Upwards, and it wants to strengthen the competition for Canadians. And it involves increasing proactive enforcement and leveraging amendments to the Competition Act to better protect Canadians from anti-competitive activity. And among other objectives, it wants to undertake what they refer to, and I've heard you refer to it earlier, they want to do a market study under the revised Competition Act. Can you expand on that? And the reason I'm saying that is that, I hear from my constituents there's concern about market dominance in finance, food, telecom, in the tech industry, and in the petroleum industry. So will this start developing some strategies to improve competition in those areas?
Biden, thank you very much for raising a question that would interest most Canadians watching. I can tell you one of the things, we were one of the very few countries in the world, and a colleague should listen to that. Imagine we had a competition commissioner with no subpoena power. So basically, before we amended the law, you have like the head of competition in this country could write a letter to a company and say, please provide me the information. And someone say, well, thanks, but no thanks. And that was basically the end of it. I think it was, to me, that was one of the priority we had was to give enforcement power. Now, if you do a market study, you have subpoena power. You say, well, you don't want to give me the information, we'll seek it to court. And that is probably one of the most fundamental things. If we want to have, the market study, and colleagues would know, I look at Mr. Massé, Mr. Garon were here with me. I mean, when we did the last one on grocery, this was all on a voluntary basis. But if you want Canadians and Parliament and government to have a view of a certain market, you need to be able to compel companies to provide information. I could think we would probably be the only country of the G7 I can imagine. I'm a lawyer myself, but to suggest that you have an enforcement agency that knocks on your door and say, would you please give me information, that's not what you need, and that's what we change. And I'll give you an example of other things we did. That will go to the question of Mr. Williams. When it's well known that I've been talking to some foreign grocers to see whether we could bring deep discounters in this country to have more competition. I'll tell you, Mr. Van Bynen, one of them that I met, they said, Minister, we looked at Canada a couple of years ago, but because of the restrictive covenant in the leases, before we changed the law, you could have one of the major grocers that would have a store within like a plaza, but they would have restrictive covenants that you couldn't have a store within 5 or 10 kilometers. Worse, even if they were to leave, no one could go there. So you would have these food desert in Canada. And I can tell you, I was with the CEO of one large, I would say, grocers in the United States, which, you know, they have the wherewithal of billions behind them. They said, we tried to lease 400 or 500 properties in Canada in Site A. No one would lease it to them. And he said, now that you change the law, and now that these restrictive covenants are legal, now we're going to be able to look again at the market. Will I succeed? I don't know. Is it worth the effort? Definitely. Am I going to fight? Yes. But that's the type of thing where, thanks to Parliament and our government and division and my colleagues, we've been able to make, when I was saying, when you reform competition, this is probably the most important dividend we've done for Canada for generations to come, because those are fundamental pillars. Yes, you can attract investment, and you can do this, you can do that. But when you have more choice, you have usually, and everywhere you've seen in the world, you have better prices, more options. That's what we want to see in every sector of our economy.
Great, thank you. I know that we've talked an awful lot about the electric vehicle and the EV supply chain, but I'm also interested in other parts of our future and investing in future. So can you talk a little bit more about the critical investments that we're making in science and research and what that means for Canada? Well,
listen, thank you again. You seem to focus on the big things. Definitely, I always say the science of today is the economy of tomorrow. That's why in 2016 we made record investment in science, and now you've seen in the last budget $3.5 billion. I'll mention one, $2.4 billion on AI. You know, Canada is already a world leader. We were the first country in the world to have an AI national strategy. We were the first country in the world with the United States to have a voluntary code of conduct. We want to keep that leading position. I can say Joshua Benjo, which has been recognized, he's a Canadian, but has been recognized by Time Magazine as one of the 100 people in the world which have more influence, is helping us. And I would, you know, say to people in the committee, they should listen to his voice on C27 because he's world-renowned. And to maintain that capacity of leading these investment in AI, the $2.4 billion we've announced to have more computing power, and the agreement we signed with NVIDIA recently, you know, that should give confidence to Canadians that we're going to continue to lead.
Merci. Thank you, MP Van Bynen. I'm sorry, but that's all the time you had. Je passerai la parole à Monsieur Garon.
I give the floor to Mr. Garon for 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Minister, I have a question. It's a yes/no answer. Would you be willing to table the total of the value of all of the investments by province on EVs with the committee? Well, I think that's already public knowledge. I think what we could give as information has already been tabled. But what we can give you is already public information. The public is aware of this, and I think Mr. Massé knows this. There are confidential aspects to these agreements, but what is public, we'd be pleased to table. And Quebec and Ontario have received significant investments. Also BC. Thank you. Another short answer, please. A national strategy for aerospace. What's the date? We've been waiting 20 years. When can we expect that? Now you're going to tell me everything that you've done for that sector, and I understand it. The national strategy, aerospace space strategy. When? Well, I think you were with me. I said that we will have one. That's a good thing. And you know, well, we've been saying that for 30 years. Well, I haven't been Minister of Industry for 30 years. If not, then I'd be older than I am. But what I can say, on the other hand, is, and I'm serious, Mr. Garon, I'm talking about investments, because if we spend all of our time creating strategies, that's one thing, but then we also have to act. Okay, I understand what you're saying. Explain to me, please, why every time we see a business in the aerospace sector, and you know I have a lot in my riding, there are some in Dorval, some in Longueuil, every time they come back and tell us that it's all well and good, these investments, but until this is structured with an aerospace strategy, we're missing the biggest piece of the pie. Because Why do they say that? And you say, on the other hand, that we are acting and the strategy can wait. When can we expect this? Well, as I said, there is an urgency to move, to act. With Pratt & Whitney, I've talked about people at DevTech and Airbus and people at Safran as well. You said that we are only third in the world, but I don't know. I think Toulouse and Seattle, but, well, you don't have a date. Yeah, because, well, we have one before the end of your mandate. Because you have to move on this at some point in time. Answer. At the same time, if you ask the aerospace sector, well, they're telling us we need a strategy. Every time they say that. Well, that's why I said that we would, and we're working on it, but at the same time, investments are required. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Massey. You have the floor.
Sure. InvestOntario.ca actually lists out the Ontario investments for auto. It's a pretty good site. Yeah, I'll pass it on to, well, it does include all of Canada, though. So I did want to ask about Statistics Canada because it's often forgot about here, but we actually at one point had a minister that wanted to jail people for not filling out their Stats Canada stuff going back in the day. Now, they have a 40% increase in their budget this year coming up. Is that because they were getting ready for another Stats Can, or is it we're adding something more robust to the information gathering? A lot of people don't understand that Stats Canada can also lead to what amount of money goes in your riding, depending upon the measurements of poverty and a whole slew of different things. So it's an important one for MPs. But just wondering what's going on at Stats Canada with that type of an increase.
And thank you for the question, and I'm very pleased you asked that question. I think it's to do more because now they're going to be collecting certain type of information, and we wanted to make sure they have the means to do that. But like we said, we're happy to get back to you more specifically. But the additional amount is making sure that they would collect that they would have the means to collect these additional information that we have committed to collect, but I'm happy to get back to you with the very specific.
And that's fine. I don't expect, again, I've been here for a while, and there's such a complexity to the files of industry, and I know I get into the weeds with a little bit of these things, but they actually are very important to our ridings. You got a little.
I may have some that would be of interest to you. I kind of remember, but the deputy helped me. It's around census for agriculture and general census, so the additional money. You know, we said also in terms of grocery affordability that we need to connect more data, for example, food price data. And so we're the additional support that we receive in the budget, it's about collecting, giving the ability or the means to Stats Canada to be able to collect additional information.
Okay, that's excellent actually to hear because that is important. Lastly, real quickly, Crown copyright in Canada. This is the distribution of public materials that are produced by the government. We haven't changed that since 1911. The law was actually enacted in 1909. The United States provides this information. The UK, every other Commonwealth, we are stuck and mired in a system where we deny businesses, researchers, and everyone opportunity to have government and taxpayer-generated information, studies, and data. What's your position on Crown copyright? And can we work together to modernize in Canada? I think 1911 is a little bit too stale for ourselves, and we're out of touch with our U.S. neighbors as well on this.
Happy, I would say, Mr. Chair, when the committee has finished C27, we'll have ample time to look at all these questions. But to your point, Mr. Massa, yes, I'm open to look at that, to be honest. It's one of these things. I may just say, and I know it's not C27, but the last time we looked at privacy in this country was before Google and before we had Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So that's why I'm always coming back to the urgency of C27. I think folks watching at home would be surprised that the law today is predating, most of the social media that exists to protect our kids.
I happen to have a private member's bill on Crown copyright that you're welcome to steal, and I wouldn't call it fraud.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Massey, on those wise words. And now we still have about 5 minutes left, so we'll go to Mr. Viss and Mr. Généreux, but please time yourself accordingly. We have only 5 minutes. Mr. Viss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Under the departmental plan, under companies' investment and growth, it said the departmental result states that Canadian businesses and industries are innovative and growing. Why does the BDC report that Canada has 100,000 fewer entrepreneurs than it did 20 years ago?
I would say what I see inspire me in this country. And I think the investment you've seen, I think we're talking $46 billion that's been invested since 2020. This is going to have a rippling effect all over. I mean, as you know, like you, I care about innovation in this country. I care about small and medium-sized businesses. They're 98%. That's the backbone of our economy. And I think when you have these anchor investors, it's going to have a rippling effect in the country, and that's what we want to favor.
Thank you. The BDC also reports that in the early 2000s, 3 out of every 1,000 Canadians chose to become an entrepreneur. Today, that number is 1.3. I as well care a lot about Canadian businesses. That's why I'm so alarmed by Statistics Canada, which reports insolvency numbers of 58.8% year over year from February of 2024. How do you respond to so many businesses shutting their doors in Canada?
Well, I'm happy that I have an ally when it comes to businesses. I know your background, and it's great. I would say, let's remember we're on the back of COVID. I mean, a lot of companies and a lot of industries went to a very tough time. I think we have picked up because we were there to support them, unlike other countries in the world. They've seen that we have their back. And I can tell you my focus is always to see how we can support the wealth creator in this nation, which create wealth, but also jobs for many other Canadians.
Thank you. So going back to the company's investments in growth part of the departmental plan, what would you give your department a ranking in respect to their primary goal of helping new startups and businesses innovate in Canada?
Well, I would say when I'm with folks, I was recently talking with, there's 2 mega trends in the economy, decarbonization and digitization. I was with a number of them in Toronto. I would say when you go in the digital sector, AI, quantum, cyber, Canada punch above its weight, and we're going to continue to invest in these sector of the future.
Thank you.
Merci.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Minister. Chop, chop, chop. A lot of our colleagues in the House of Commons, say that we're going to cut everywhere. That's how they've characterized us. Of the agencies we have in Canada that have been cut, there's Quebec, the Economic Development Agency. At least $168 million less has been given to them. So with the number of bankruptcies in Quebec right now, which is the highest rate in Canada, and the small and medium-sized businesses, and because of interest rates at the moment being so high, what are you saying to those small and medium-sized businesses that will be cut off because of your government? Well, I would say that we've always been there, and those businesses know that. What's most worrisome is that when I asked the Conservative leaders that they would support investments we've made in the private sector in Quebec, I have a great deal of respect for you. You're an employer and a business creator. But the investments that we've made in Quebec in the automobile industry, when's the last time we created a new industry in Quebec? I think we have to go way back in time. You and I are about the same age. We've just brought Quebec into the automobile industry recently now, and people are listening to that. So would your leaders support those investments? Well, the question that has to be asked is, how is it that the expenses for the department for operations are increasing, but we're seeing the development agencies being cut? We're at a time in Canada where we are having a serious problem with productivity, and these economic development agencies across Canada, as well as in Quebec, are helping businesses to improve their productivity. And now we've seen these cuts, including this $168 million in the province of Quebec alone. So when you're responsible for the department, normally in terms of innovation and technologies, small and medium-sized businesses, especially the smallest ones that need help to develop, won't have the means to do so. And these agencies won't have the ability to help them. And we're in a very bad posture in terms of productivity in Canada. Well, productivity problems aren't just recent, that we've been talking about that for 30 years. I think that one of the things that will help, and I'll help you, is artificial intelligence. I think in helping our SMEs to develop such tools will help us in terms of productivity. I saw it in Montreal. with people like people in the food businesses, for example, the more we can help people with technologies, the better we will do. These are people who create wealth and create for everyone. Well, let's be clear. It's not by cutting Quebec's agency that will improve things there. Well, if you look at overall budgets, look at what we did, for example, in investments, and thinking of LM Win in Gaspé, for example, we're going to be producing important things there. In artificial intelligence, we're talking about Volta and various companies that you remember Volta Granby got a huge investment. Yes, I agree with you, but you're letting down the SMEs. That's what bothers me. Well, I don't think so. I think that we're always going to support our SMEs. It's at least 90% of the Canadian economy. You know that we've helped a great many people. People in the street will say that. They know that we were there to help them. And many people I think if we look to the past, you'll see that will show what we can do in the future. And that's the same thing for SMEs. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Off that positive comment, that brings our 2 hours to an end that we had for Rio Tinto and the main estimates, and I thank you very much for having participated. 2 hours is a long time in committee. You're always welcome. We'll suspend briefly, and then we'll come back with the officials for the last hour on the estimates. So the meeting is...
Bon après-midi.
Good afternoon. Colleagues, we are back.
We're on the mains with officials, and we have Simon Kennedy, qui est Deputy Minister. Nous avons Charles Vincent, sous-ministre.
We have Charles Vincent, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Industry Sector. Stephanie Tanton, Assistant Deputy Minister. Also, Mark Chan, who is a regular at the committee. And he's with us again. Thank you for coming back. And so we can begin without further ado. There aren't any preliminary comments, so we can begin with Mr. Perkins for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, everyone. I guess Mr. Shen missed us, so he's back, even though we're not on C-27. I'd like to start, Deputy, if I could, again with the Net Zero Accelerator. So for the $8 billion that has been committed to this, the Environment Commissioner, which is part of the Auditor General's office, said that the department doesn't track the per dollar value or benefit of whether or not it's actually reducing carbon. What's your response to that?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, thanks very much for the question. So I'd like to assure the honourable member and the whole committee that we do, in fact, track GHG reductions. In fact, we have a very sophisticated process to actually work with companies to figure out what we think the reduction will be. There is a committee of federal experts in this field. We engage, I think, 5 external experts of various kinds. There's a pretty elaborate diligencing process to figure out for these large investments, what would be the greenhouse gas reductions that we would be seeking. And in fact, in the case of large emitters where we're investing actually to get rapid reductions in emissions, that's one of the business lines of the program. The funding we provide is tied to their reduction of emissions. And we have the ability to claw it back if they don't reduce. So there's a whole follow-up and kind of measurement and reporting infrastructure to make sure that happens. And I could start just to answer directly, at this point of the projects where we have signed agreements, there is 11 megatons of reductions by 2030 that are contractually bound in the contracts we signed.
The Environment Commissioner said only 5, I believe, 17 contracts actually contained a commitment to reduce carbon. Is that correct?
I think, Mr. Chair, it's maybe just very briefly to kind of provide a bit of context, which is most of the Environment Commissioner's report was focused on one particular pillar of the Net Zero Accelerator. And it was one of the concerns we had, frankly, and I had a lengthy discussion with the Commissioner about his audit. The program actually has 3 pillars. And there are projects across the 3 pillars that have reductions in greenhouse gases. But for reasons that you'd have to discuss with the Commissioner, his main focus was on Pillar 1. So when I'm talking about 11 megatons, I'm talking about the collection of projects across the...
Commissioner's report,
right,
and Pillar 1, and most of the contracts don't have carbon emission targets. And in fact, out of the 50 largest emitters in Canada, I think you only have contracts with 3.
We are in due diligence with multiple companies. I think there are 9 that are currently in due diligence. There are 10. So there are 10 large emitters in due diligence. I think it's important, Mr. Chair, for the committee to understand that these are very large projects, multi-billion-dollar projects, and usually the Strategic Innovation Fund, the Net Zero Accelerator, is actually fairly early to the table. There are companies where we have already issued a letter of intent, where we're kind of ready to engage further, and actually we're almost never the rate limiting factor. Usually these corporates have other investors they have to line up, they have engineering studies to do, and so in the case of
I've limited time, so
but it's just important to note that the Commissioner's concern is that we only have 2, but there are 10 more in active due diligence where we have plans to make investments.
Thank you. Moving on, you gave a speech to a small group in a law firm in Toronto, I think it was a small group, about C-27, which we requested the copy of the speech of, and you kindly provided at the Business Leaders Breakfast in Toronto. And it was behind closed doors. And in that speech, you said, when we talk, quotes, when we talk about high-impact AI systems, we are focused on a few key areas. And you go on to list the systems which include, quotes, systems that can really be used to shape and often narrow perspectives if not appropriately monitored. what narrow perspectives are you going to use Bill C-27 to moderate content on?
So, Mr. Chair, maybe just for clarification, I regularly get invited to speak to business groups and others, and I try really hard to kind of go out and talk to a variety of groups, so certainly...
Mr. Chair, just with respect, I don't have much time, and I don't need sort of a dissertation on how you approach speeches. I just need you to focus on answering the questions so I can get my questions in.
It was mostly, I think, the suggestion that this was some sort of closed-door meeting. I just want to indicate we as a practice try to get out and talk to the business community. That's the business that we're in. What I would say is that was a document prepared by the department for virtually every kind of public setting where I'm asked to go and meet people.
Systems and what narrow speeches? That's my question. You're off the topic. What speech are you trying to narrow and censor on the internet through AR bill and algorithms?
I think
and you went on to say you've got to control misinformation and disinformation.
Right.
So you must have an intent about what you're going to do with that power to censor the internet.
Maybe perhaps if the chair will indulge me, I'll ask Mark Sean to speak to this issue because his area is actually working on the legislation in question.
So
Mr. Chair, as I noted already, this was a briefing note prepared by the department.
It was a speech.
I did not,
Mr.
Chair, I did not read the speech.
The
I frequently, when I'm asked to come to talk to a breakfast, it's a quick Q&A session. I kind of talk off the cuff. I often get documents from the department that I read as a kind of aide-memoire, but I did not read a prepared text, and so I can't ascertain as to whether that exact language was used, but it's very unlikely because I spoke off the cuff at the meeting. I'm happy to have Mr. Sean speak to this substance because his office was the one that prepared the document.
We have proposed to highlight a number of high-impact AI systems that would be subject to regulation, that would have obligations in terms of transparency, in terms of red teaming, and in terms of some of the protections against potential harm and bias that would be put in place as a function of that. And so this specific reference is about the possibilities for some of these high-impact AI systems to be able to continue to highlight biased information to Canadians. And so without appropriate protections from regulations.
For 2.5 minutes, I've asked a simple question. What specific, it's not that you're going to do bias, I know that, you've said that and you've said it in the bill. What biases are you aiming at? To do this, you must have it. You said you're going to stop misinformation.
Well, Mr. Chair, let's take an example. It's a hypothetical, but a preferencing system that is shown to consistently, show content to young people that encourages them to engage in harmful behavior, shows them information about how to harm themselves. That might be an example of a preferencing system that we would have serious concerns about because the algorithm is actually driving people, who are still in development to consume content that is actually quite, damaging to their health and well-being, as an example.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Monsieur Turnbull, la parole est à vous pour 6 minutes.
Well, thanks, Chair, and thanks to all of you for being here today. Great to have you. And I wanted to start with, I know that many of us have mentioned in previous rounds of questions about grocery prices. Obviously, competition is a really big part of our government's sort of agenda to help stabilize food prices, but not only food prices. Certainly, there's consolidation in quite a number of industries in Canada that I think merit serious consideration when it comes to competition reforms. And so, Mr. Kennedy, maybe you could start by just saying, how, and speak generally about our approach to competition reform and how that's really going to help to both stabilize and hopefully long-term provide more choice and hopefully lower prices to Canadians.
Thank you for the question. So, Mr. Chair, we have, working closely with the Commissioner of Competition and the Minister, obviously tried to advance a fairly comprehensive set of reforms to competition. So a couple of examples that would be relevant to the grocery sector, but certainly to others, would be the ability of the Commissioner to conduct market studies. So this was, as the Minister had talked about before, if there's a concern about behavior in a particular industry and the Commissioner wishes to study it. In the past, actually getting access to the data was entirely dependent on the voluntary participation of the industry players. Now there'll be much better power to kind of go in there and do the study and kind of shine a light in areas where there may be problems.
There were changes that were made to better get at the issue of so-called, horizontal collaborations. So if you've got, in an industry, you've got, players that are, colluding, working together to kind of reduce competition. That's illegal if, for example, you have two people in the same industry, two grocery companies get together. Wasn't strictly speaking a problem if you had people in two completely different sectors getting together. For example, landlords with restrictive covenants in their tenancy agreements, and so that has been addressed by the reforms to the competition legislation. There's now, I believe, a private right of action so that parties that feel aggrieved, they are injured, can actually go to the tribunal and seek relief. So there's a whole series of reforms that have been made to, frankly, make it easier to get relief in the case of problems, to make it easier for the Commission to go after examples of anti-competitive conduct. We have removed the efficiencies defense. I think honourable members will know about that, but basically, in Canada, it had become, as a result of jurisprudence and so on, an absolute right of defense. So as long as your merger resulted in a more efficient outcome that outweighed the damages, that was an absolute defense you could bring to the table to kind of justify your merger. So literally, prices could rise, consumers could be harmed, choice could go down on the market, workers could be let go, and as long as the new enterprise was more efficient than the previous two, all of that was fine. Well, efficiencies is no longer a defense that's available, to companies. So there have been very significant structural changes that have been made to the legislation. There's been a lot of commentary on that, so maybe I won't add further at this time, but happy to have us go into detail if there's a desire. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm sort of interested in what impact that will have short and maybe medium long term. I mean, certainly it's hard to predict, but some of these changes have been probably contemplated for quite a while, and I know that quite a lot of consultation was done. So what I'm interested in is how quickly will we see the impact of these changes? Do we have sort of, I mean, I'm sure it's hard to predict that, but I wonder how quickly markets respond to those signals that go out there. I'm sure industry is paying attention to our proceedings. Certainly with the Finance Committee and our work, Mr. Sean was with us for many hours on C-59, which made an additional round of changes to the Competition Act. So I'm wondering maybe you can speak to what impact that will have and how quickly will we see impact?
Well, Mr. Chair, I will turn to Mr. Sean to maybe provide a little bit more color, but I would maybe make two observations just based on my civil service career to date. I think there will be absolutely an immediate impact, but the immediate impact may be, in certain cases, things that don't happen. So there's kind of a counterfactual that, there would have been behavior that we would have been concerned about that no longer will happen because boards and, and companies and the legal firms that advise them and so on will advise that this is going to be now a problem. So I think that, some of the deleterious things we were worried about on a go-forward basis, you're going to see less of it because the law has been changed. In terms of the structure of the economy and changes, obviously that would take longer. Maybe Mark may want to speak a little bit more about what we might expect to see.
Yeah, maybe just quickly, I'd say it's a law of general economic application that applies across the entirety of the economy. And so it will modify behavior as it relates to how people approach the overall kind of actions they're going to take in areas where competition has a really big bearing. That's things like mergers, that's things like acquisitions, and it also sets the rules for a number of these private rights of actions in terms of abuses of dominance and some of the real concerns in the marketplace. I think, as the deputies noted, some of that's going to be immediate. We're going to have mergers that people will look at and say, "Well, under the new rules, I'm not sure that that's going to happen." Some of that will happen over the medium term. Things like the increase to the look-back period for "quote-unquote" killer acquisitions in the digital space. This is adding the time period in which the Bureau has the capacity to look back and say, actually, that was a really important technology, and that was a major company coming to rout out competition by buying this up. That's the kind of thing that will have a more significant impact over the medium to long term.
So maybe just a quick follow-up. So in terms of the strategic thinking, competition reforms, there's multiple rounds. Not going to have all of the impact in terms of breaking, corporate consolidation in different industries. But is there also another pillar of the strategy, which is to invest in smaller companies, to grow the economy sort of from the base or from the startup and scale some of those startups. Is that part of the strategy to increase competition? Mr. Kennedy, could you speak to that?
So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. If we take groceries just as an example, it's just as a practical matter, we can kind of focus on one industry. I would say that the competition reforms were seen as important step. There's been work, as members know, on the Grocery Code of Conduct to try to really mediate the behavior among the players in the supply chain. We think that the consumer sector and consumer advocacy, frankly, in Canada, has been an area that hasn't had a lot of attention in frankly, many years, decades, in fact. So the ministry has made a fairly sizable reinvestment in the kind of consumer rights and consumer agenda side of the ledger. There's been a very significant increase in support to consumer groups. The minister's had a number of meetings with consumer groups to be out there kind of, basically shining a light on bad practices, naming and shaming, turning up the heat around consumer issues. We have been working with the provincial governments. We've had a first meeting of ministers on this topic. There have been a number of meetings of senior officials. I have to say it's been many years, I don't have the date, but it's been many years since consumer affairs ministers and senior officials have had these kind of regular series of meetings. So I wouldn't claim that all of that has changed everything, but it's just to say on our relations with provinces and territories who have a lot of the on-the-ground responsibility for consumer issues and so on, when it comes to legislation, when it comes to the code of conduct and the supply chain, when it comes to our financing of the consumer sector. So we've tried to take, I would say, a multi-pronged approach in the grocery sector to bring some pressure to bear on the various players to act.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Garon. La parole est à vous.
Thank you, Mr. Garon. You have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And welcome to the committee, ladies and gentlemen. We spoke with the minister earlier, and it wasn't a big surprise, but he said there wasn't a national aerospace strategy that's on the way, which doesn't negate the fact that we're trying to make positive efforts to develop the industry. And I think that this strategy is needed. In that context, you must know that Canada recently announced sanctions on titanium. So this is a material that is important. It's expensive and it's very hard to acquire in the short term. But what I understand is that there are arms that are fabricated with this. So apparently these sanctions that Canada was the only country to impose. What titanium we have here will find its way elsewhere. But it's targeting an industry that is a leading one in Quebec. So, and now I'm the member for Mirabel. I wondered if these companies were consulted before these sanctions were put in place. Mr. Champagne's department, I wonder if they were consulted as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the question. On the issue of titanium, I can tell you that we were working in close collaboration with Global Affairs and the industry so that when there's a policy change such as you've referred to, we want to make sure. Sorry, if I may, I'm sorry, I want to interrupt you. I'm trying to do it politely. I understand that your department would be in favor of exemptions, particularly for aeronautical companies, and that you're working in that regard. Yes, I think that the policy was drafted really by Global Affairs. They would be in a better position to answer the questions. But for us, we really have an interest in ensuring that there isn't a negative impact on the aerospace sector. We're always in discussion with them and speaking with them and also with the foreign affairs people to ensure that measures are taken and that the sanctions won't have an impact on that sector. I hope that answers your question. Well, it's not a question that's trying to make you uncomfortable, but it's just I am very concerned about this very significant sector. And I'm wondering whether such decisions are sometimes taken quickly. Thank you for answering that. A question quickly on C-27. This bill creates a new tribunal. And we've been told on the government side that with the new obligations that the privacy commissioner would have, that that would result in more lawsuits and so on, and we're judging that tribunal on that basis. The decisions in the past were made by the privacy commissioner, and some of them moved on to higher courts, and so that leaves us to understand, and now you'll understand why I'm asking the question, it leaves the impression that if we give more tools to the commissioner to do his or her job, that the creation of this new tribunal is indeed intended to weaken that. So as we speak to each other in the hallways here, we're wondering who in the Department of Ministry met with the minister, who was consulted, because we didn't see those people at committee. We've worked quickly on the bill. We know that the minister carried out consultations. So I wonder if the members of the committee here could be told exactly what businesses in the minister consulted before tabling C-27 and also before tabling the mountain of amendments on it. Well, perhaps you asked me the question. I can offer you a rather general answer. Well, I just want a list of people. Well, I'd be pleased to get back to you with more detail on those consultations. Clearly for C-27, in terms of data, there were a great many consultations. It's the second time we've tabled such a bill, so there have been a great many discussions with various stakeholders. Well, I'm asking the question because it's difficult for us to know what environment we're working in. There are three parts to the bill. The officials who are here are doing the best they can, but to have a better idea of the environment in which we work would help us, and it would help us to work more quickly. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, but I don't know if I may offer a few comments on the tribunal. And this is just the way I see it. That might offer a more, one of my colleagues might offer a more technical answer. But the idea of the bill is to set up new structures on the use of data. So we're going to create an environment that's much tighter for industries, for the use of data, and privacy is very important. We want to protect that. But there's the whole issue of the economy, and we want to create an environment where there's really access to justice and access to answers quite quickly when there are problems or issues. So the idea with the tribunal, that's a tool that's quite common in other domains. And that's to ensure that there's a group that exists to answer questions quite quickly when there is an issue. Did the business create a problem or not? Are they respecting the law or not? So if people aren't happy with the tribunal's decision, they can always move on to court. But that's a mechanism to provide a rapid answer and to give some reassurance to people that there's a group that exists that's going to look at all the facts and all of the circumstances and make a decision. I don't know if that's a good explanation, but that's the concept. Well, that's better. It's our perspective that with the changes to the law, there will always be the possibility of further actions. But do we have an objective assessment of that? But the decisions of the commissioner in the past, there are a few. But the second question is, if the Minister of Justice appointed more judges, would things speed up? Well, I don't know. But in the future, we think that we will need to have more decisions rendered quickly. So will a mechanism like the tribunal make the whole process more efficient? I don't know. We can come back. I don't know if we talked about it here because I know Mark was here several times, but we can come back with a more detailed explanation of the raison d'être for the tribunal. And honestly, it's a decision that we took on our part, but it's to provide decisions efficiently and effectively more quickly, and so people are not always obliged to go before the courts or go through Parliament, because that's serious and it takes a lot of time, because there are more and more applications, and there are all kinds of steps to protect privacy. Mr. Massey.
I looked up and from the competition reforms that are very good. The first time raised that when committee here was 2003 when James Rajat was the chair. Sometimes I feel like the scream represents my life here at committee. But it is important, and I'm really happy to see this stuff happening with the Competition Bureau. There's still things I want to see happen, but I want to make sure, though, budgetary-wise, again, I didn't get a specific response. Do we know? Yeah. Because I really want them to have the empowerment necessary. They got some amazing people, by the way, that are in that organization.
So, Mr. Chair, to the honourable member's question, the amount is they've received $96 million of new funding over 5 years, and so that would have that is money that carries over from year to year. It doesn't show up as new funding in these estimates, but I do know, and the commissioner is obviously the proper person to talk about this, but we work very closely together. They are still in ramp-up mode. I mean, they're still hiring, they're still building, they're still kind of building out the capacity that funding provided. But we were very, very happy, I have to say, even as officials, to see that bureau receive a pretty substantial increase in funds.
Yeah, because it's part of that is about, like, if we want to save taxpayers money, there's always spending that takes place here. There's cuts and so forth. But there's also what's often in Northern Canada is the market economy of being ripped off and being, frankly, I've always said that Canada gets treated like a colony by some businesses. I could give a good example is the auto industry where, I know it's not your department, it's our transport, but under auto recall, and that the United States citizens receive a far superior treatment than Canadian consumers, and I could go on with a bunch of different things. So I really believe the Competition Bureau changes are critical for lowering costs for Canadians. So I do appreciate the work on that. And with that, I want to move to the grocery store code of conduct, the voluntary one that's being proposed. Are the resources being provided for that, or is it still being hatched? What is taking place, and why not go to something that's not voluntary? I looked at this quite a bit 4 or 5 years ago, the voluntary one. They don't seem to be successful in other places. I know that there's a theory of that, start with this and then go from there. But I'm at the point where I'd prefer to see some type of, if you in the auto industry, we have like the incentive versus that of the punishment if you don't follow through on what you're supposed to be doing. So kind of where is it? Is it getting resources? What do we have to look forward to? And are there any hooks to it for consumers?
So, Mr. Chair, maybe 2 quick comments. One is, just in fairness, the Code of Conduct is led by the Minister of Agriculture, so my colleague, the Deputy, would be kind of inappropriate for me to trample all over kind of her area of responsibility. I will say we work very closely with the Agriculture Ministry. There's definitely still active work going on that we're involved in, and we have visibility on trying to drive the code of conduct across the finish line. I think there is a measure of optimism that will happen soon. But that has been a process that's been underway for some time. There's been a lot of investment by provinces and by the industry itself, and I think there's been an effort to see whether or not that will yield fruit, and then if it does not in some timely way, then there could be other ways to pursue the same outcome. But for now, the Ag Ministry is managing that, and they might be in a better position to kind of provide you a bit more detail.
Fair enough. It's just that it touches in our department here too, because you got to remember this industry. I mean, they cut pandemic pay the same day across the board after the lawyers talked to each other, which was technically allowed because the CEOs didn't talk to each other. And then these are the people that actually fix the price of bread. I mean, this is, and that's where the competition and industry comes in place, is that the Competition Bureau was the one that brought that to light. I can't think of a lower point when one of the basic staples for Canadians is used as a weapon against them. with regards to price fixing. So that's why I guess I don't have a lot of, I guess, time for a voluntary code of conduct versus something more enforcement. You're kind of rewarding bad behavior. But I'll leave it there for that. I do want to follow up on with regards to telecommunications industries and spectrum auctions that are coming up. Is there any further spectrum auctions? I haven't stayed on top of it yet, but are there spectrum auctions that are going to be coming up in the next year?
Mr. Chair, there are definitely more spectrum auctions coming. There's a millimeter wave auction that is coming. The work is underway on that. I'm looking over at my colleague Mark, who works very closely with our spectrum and telecom branch. I don't know if you want. Go ahead.
So, Mr. Chair, there is in fact a millimeter wave consultation that's been held, and there's also one on. I'm going to get the name of it wrong. Exactly. I was like, it's a separate framework for essentially what we call unused sort of segments of the sector, and so those are the two spectrum frameworks that are still out.
Yeah, so the unused ones are, yeah, exactly. That's something I've been after for a long period of time as well, too, is to get them back into the system. So there will be that use it or lose it policy. That's is that where they're coming from, or is it different?
So it's different. So use it or lose it is part of the build-out conditions that are part of the ultimate result of a spectrum auction. So when spectrum is actually auctioned, it then has conditions assigned to it, including license conditions for what the build-out rate is and how quickly it has to be put in force. This is a separate framework that's for where you've got essentially low amounts of spectrum, where you potentially want to put, for instance, like a network around a manufacturing facility or a farm field, and it's a separate band that essentially is near the millimeter wave, but essentially kind of works in that space. I just can't remember the name of it.
No, and that's okay. Actually, I'll finish with this. That actually is pretty important, because I know that some industrial parks have these kind of pockets that don't have the service and the speed necessary for them to compete globally, which I've run into that in a number of different areas. So
that is, Mr. Chair, that is a specific area that we are interested in, and there's been a lot. When obviously members will judge whether it's sufficient, but we have been really working hard to free up more spectrum. So, for example, we have residual auctions, like when there's spectrum left over that nobody bids on, we kind of go back out and offer it to players and so on. So there's we have a lot in this space. We'd be happy to share more.
Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Massé. Monsieur Viss, la parole est à vous pour ça.
Mr. Viss, you have the floor.
On the main estimates, it shows that the Canada Foundation for Sustainable Development Technologies is getting $191,380,000 and change. Isn't the Green Fund still under a ministerial order?
So, Mr. Chair, I can turn to the CFO to add color if it's color commentary if desired, but I can just assure the honourable member there's been no new funding put into SDTC. The money that was referenced when the minister was here, the $750, would have been the last capital injection. This would be money that's already in the fiscal framework and is probably just being reprofiled from one year to the next until a decision will be made ultimately as to what to do. So it's not new
it was
funding.
A new grant under the main estimates. It was line 374.
It's more, Mr. Chair, that there is funding that is available for. It's available for the purpose.
But they're not giving it yet.
They're putting it aside, but that money has not actually been put out the door yet.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
It states in the main estimates that EV battery manufacturers are receiving $236,846,000 in change. Where is that money going?
So, Mr. Chair, this would be going to firms that have agreements under the Strategic Innovation Fund for the purposes of, building a battery facility. And so, as has been noted and as has been announced publicly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Oh, so also the Strategic Innovation Fund outlines $2,380,000,000 and change. What I understood was that money was for the construction of plants, and that the $236 million I just referenced in the main estimates was only going to be provided, that the battery companies would only get money from the government once they produced the battery. Can you explain that discrepancy for me, Mr. Chair?
So, Mr. Chair, I might have to come back with precision on this, but just to respond to your question, for a number of the EV manufacturers, there are two different agreements. There's one which is capital support to build the facility. That typically goes directly through the Strategic Innovation Fund, so some of that you probably see in the estimates. And then there is funding through special contribution agreements, which are designed to mimic, in a sense, the IRA. And there may be some money provision for that, but as you noted, as the member noted, that would only go out if and when batteries are shipped.
Can you provide a breakdown to the committee of those expenditures to date, please?
Certainly, we could come back on that.
Thank you. Why does British Columbia get less money for economic development than other provinces?
Mr. Chair, I maybe just would note it had come up earlier, but the regional development agencies are actually no longer in the industry portfolio, and so they're actually separate ministers and deputy ministers accountable for those agencies. So I totally appreciate the member's question, but it's sort of not in our portfolio anymore. So I'm
asked that before, I believe.
Yes, right.
The Universal Broadband Fund, there's $432 million for it. $432 million and change. What percentage, can you provide a breakdown of which telecommunication company is receiving funds under the Universal Broadband Fund according to the estimates?
So, Mr. Chair, we can come back on that for sure. What I would say, and it's just a very brief context, that the estimates provide kind of the allocations, year over year. And so there are many infrastructure projects under the Universal Broadband Fund. And so this is kind of the current year's funding requirements. It may not be going to specific new projects only announced this year. It's the kind of flow of cash to support the broader program. We can certainly come back with the full list of projects and where they are across the country.
With that 432, I'd love to see that before I vote on it. Thank you, Deputy Minister. I looked in the internal services. I will note it went from about 190 to 184. On expenditures, so you've had a $6 million reduction in your internal services. That's good. If you were an auditor, where would you be looking for further savings in the operationalization of your department?
Oh gosh, Mr. Chair, that's a tricky question. Maybe to answer the honourable member's question, I would just say that the government has been very clear on its intent to have further expenditure restraint, which we obviously take very seriously. I personally take it very seriously. We want to be as efficient as we can, spending tax money. And so we have to look, in all of the areas of our operations, whether that's travel, whether that's professional services, frankly, whether that's salaries. The government has indicated there'll be a further reduction in headcount. The management team is actually, Mr. Chair, to the member's question, we are actively going over these very issues now, because my operating assumption is we will be asked to deliver our mandate with less money and fewer people, and we're going to have to figure out how to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The department provided $4.6 million for schools, for computers in schools. How many computers were provided to children?
So, Mr. Chair, I can say the Computers for Schools program has a storied history going back, I think, 30 years now, and there have been hundreds of thousands provided. I'd have to come back with the official statistics. What I would, I guess, say is it's a very efficient program. It relies extensively on volunteers and donated.
Mr. Chair, would the department be able to provide a list of the number of computers?
I think that's what Mr.
Absolutely.
Kennedy just
Yes. No problem.
suggested. So thank you on that note, Mr. Viss. That's all the time you had. I'll now turn it over to MP Van Bynen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I was certainly happy to hear about the Universal Broadband Fund, because in my own community, the regional municipality used those funds to put a fiber optic backbone throughout the entire region, and that made access to fiber optic broadband a lot more palatable in terms of pricing, because the suppliers of the last mile didn't need to put the backbone in. But I digress. I'd like to go to the Research Council in the 2024-25 estimates. National Research Council is requesting a total of about $1.6 million. I see its responsibilities include science and innovation, which according to their departmental plan compromises scientific and technological knowledge advancement, innovative business growth, and evidence-based solutions to inform government decisions. So what are the priority research areas for this year, and can you expand on the NRC's progress in those areas? And I'll ask Mr. Kennedy to direct that to whoever's appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks very much for the question. My proposal might be to ask my colleague, the president of the National Research Council, to prepare an answer to the member's question, and we'd be happy to table that at the committee. I do apologize. I don't run the NRC directly, but certainly they have an extensive list of priorities, and they've actually gone through a whole priority setting exercise in the last couple of years. So I think it would not be that difficult to come back with a fuller accounting of what they're focusing on, if that's okay.
Okay, in the process of doing so, I'd be interested in this year's funding, how much the NRC would attribute to both domestic and international partnerships through the grants and the contributions. I want to see how much are we investing here and how much are we investing externally, if that's possible.
No, noted, Mr. Chair. We'll follow up with the NRC about those requests. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to shift then over to Statistics Canada. It's requesting $736 million and almost an additional $204 million compared to last year's estimates. So the plan for the department, it focuses on the agency's continuous modernization, and we've heard about that as far as the digitization of service delivery. But how will Statistics Canada leverage large language models and generative artificial intelligence to deliver timely and reliable data? And the reason I want to expand on that is because we're undertaking the study with Bill C-27, and I'd like to have an understanding as to how that might impact the government's plans, specifically through Statistics Canada. And Mr. Kenney, I'll let you direct that too.
No, thank you very much for the question. I might ask Mr. Sean whether he has any information he'd like to pass on. I think actually to give a fuller answer that might satisfy the member, it might be useful to get the chief statistician to pull together a more detailed response. But I'm happy if Mark had any further elaboration.
Sure, I'll just quickly comment to say, the Statistics Canada has long been at the forefront of new models for utilizing technology to be able to aid and abet the statistical system. Wasn't AI, but certainly their pioneering efforts in wastewater as a means to be able to continue to understand both the use of drugs as well as the relative level of vaccines and pandemic kind of incidents was novel. They've continued to do that as well in the artificial intelligence space. I'd note that they've been active in discussions about how potentially to draw on those. I think we'd be best to come back with a report from the acting chief statistician to detail exactly what that looks like, but I can say they've been actively involved, including in the standard space around how to standardize information for the purposes of the use of artificial intelligence, including with the Standards Council of Canada, as well as with a number of other dialogues around AI in the continued consistency of information gathering.
Okay, and then my final question is that the estimates include $52.6 million to continue Canada's participation in the International Space Station until 2030. And what will this funding mean for Canadian astronauts?
So, Mr. Chair, I would say that we are obviously a partner in the International Space Station, and we're working closely with our allies on the plans to return to the moon. And so this is part and parcel of our responsibilities in that regard. I think it would probably be best if Lisa Campbell, the president of the agency, were to elaborate in greater detail. But by confirming our participation in the ISS, I can confirm that does help us secure. It secures a flight for a Canadian astronaut to the station and sustained access to that particular environment. I mean, in effect, if we want to keep sending our astronauts to the space station and participating, we have to help pay the bills, and in effect, that's what that funding is for. But I think Lisa could probably talk at greater length about the specifics of where the funding goes.
Okay, that's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, MP Van Bynen. Then that concludes our round and the hours. So I want to thank the officials for joining us this evening. And just colleagues, before I adjourn the meeting, we would have to vote on the estimates. I don't know if you want to do this right now. It's not very long. It's a familiar process. So the first thing is I would need unanimous consent to vote them all together. Do I have unanimous consent? Yes. And so shall all the votes, less the amounts voted in the interim supply carry? On division? Perfect. Shall I report the votes, less the amounts voted in interim supply to the House? On division? Okay, thank you very much. So on that note, thanks again to the officials, and the meeting is adjourned.